We're going live. I'd like to call the January 23rd, 2013 meeting of the Milton School Committee to order. And as is our custom, I invite you to rise and salute the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we start, I'd like to ask for a moment of silence in memory of Joseph McCann, who was one of the founders of the Milton Youth Basketball League with Mike Goodless, and was a mentor to a lot of young Milton students over the last several years. Thank you very much. So, we begin with our agenda this evening. On the agenda, a couple pieces under the Finance Subcommittee report. We are going to remove items B and C, the fee schedule and the December 2012 expense report, till our next meeting. Under my report, there'll be a couple of extra items. We're going to have a discussion of the card access system, and we're under the superintendent's report dealing with the program of studies, among other things, at Milton High School. We have to take a vote on the waiver of the speech requirement that we do annually, so I'll take that up under my report as well. Any other items for our agenda tonight?
Mr. Chair, on the discussion of the card access system, I'd like to show that as a discussion and a vote.
Okay. Anything else? All right then, so we will move on with our agenda. Citizen Speak, do we have anyone who has signed up more for Citizen Speak?
Card access system. Card access system, it's not on there.
Andrea Sinnott.
From the chairman.
Hello.
Hi.
Thanks for having me. My name is Andrea Sinnott. I live at 60 Capon Street. I wanted to talk about the grade 1 assignment process. And first of all, I've been trying to keep an eye out for when this policy would come up, and I guess I missed it, but Superintendent Gormley assures me that my comments are nonetheless timely, so I'll just proceed. I have three children in the Milton Public Schools. My youngest is in kindergarten. So I've some short thoughts, but I'm going to mix it up and start from the bottom of my list. And the first one, just for reference, is the draft that I got was the grade 1 assignment that has JGA up in the upper corner. I don't know if there's a more recent one that you may have access to. So the first detail point I wanted to talk about was the notion that in the French lottery process that the wait lists would expire on the first day of school, and it seems to me reasonable to extend that for a week or two in the event that families who were assigned to the French program moved over the summer without notifying the district that wait list could continue for some short period of time after the start of school. Just two other detail points, and then I'll get to the one remaining larger point, which is I fully appreciate, if I understand the policy or the assignment process correctly, that it's extraordinarily difficult, and I wouldn't want to be in the administration's shoes on this. My understanding is that it's essentially circular or iterative, because you really don't know how many French spots will be available until you've filled up the minimum number of English spots at each school. So with that in mind, and understanding that it's complex, I have two suggestions about the order of preference for that difficult period over the summer. One is the notion that kids who are on the wait list for French would temporarily be given a provisional seat, if you would, in the English program at their home school. So if the number of available French seats aren't set until the end of August, they wouldn't be they wouldn't fall behind on the list, behind people who are new to the district. That was point one. I don't think it's terribly controversial, but I thought it was worth calling out. The second point, which I think is the current process and I think is very appropriate, is that as people come in over the summer, that they should be distributed to, with a preference towards reaching those minimum number of English seats, even if that's not at their home school. And the example becomes with Cunningham and Collycut, for example. If you have the 36 English seats that you need at Cunningham, but you have 10 open seats at Collycut, it wouldn't make sense to increase the size of the English classes at Cunningham when you could achieve your goals of filling those minimum number of English seats. So I'm sorry to jump right into detail. I hope it's meaningful to the people who have been working with this in a current basis. The bigger picture that I think I was concerned about on reading the assignment process is, back in the fall, there was the question asked of what does it mean to have a lottery? And I think there were assurances given that the lottery for French, given the amount of interest in it, would be both transparent and accountable. And I think that level of detail was missing for me as I read through this draft, which is the notion that there is some transparency or accountability, not only in the way the list is generated, but in the way that the seats are filled. And I think this is an area where there's common ground or common interests between the administration and the parents with the following, so bear with me. If there's a sense that one could lobby the administration and leapfrog in line, then I think parents will feel compelled to do that, and it's really in nobody's best interest to have that process happen. So if baked into the policy is the notion that the administration really has no ability to have people leapfrog or to go outside of the set process, then I think that protects the interests both of the administration and of the parents. That doesn't, to me, mean that you have to have a public list of Joe, Jane, Susie is 1, 2, 3. There are other ways to achieve accountability, even if it's not community-wide transparency, if that makes sense. Whether that's having the PTO president or the school committee or somebody just be accountable for looking at the list and saying, yes, this was done in an appropriate process. Finally, I think way back when I had floated a suggestion that the committee consider a soft cap this year, given that it's a transition year. And if at the end of this long process there still are a sufficient number of families who are interested in French, that that a spot be found for them somewhere. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, with no one else on the citizen speak list, we'll move on to the superintendent's report. Ms. Gormley.
Thank you, Chairman Pavlicek. First, I'd like to turn over the first item under my agenda item to member Kristen Bagley-Jones and Maureen Griffin in the audience. And we have Milton High School students with us also.
So can our walkers come on up? Ms. Gormley, you welcome them, and I can get...
You take it, you take it.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair.
I think that this spot in the preparation for the walkathon puts it right over the top in the fundraising aspect, having the students at the school committee and speaking.
So, as everybody knows on the committee, and everybody knows in the community, the walkathon is Saturday, February 9th, from 1 to 4 in the Copeland Fieldhouse. I'm going to keep saying that because people need to remember the date. And the parents who are working on this include Maureen Griffin, whose daughter Caitlin is a senior, Laura Kessler, who retired when her daughter graduated, but we were able to pull her back in, Renee Tabor, who is Olivia's mom, and Jeannie Austin, who is Connor Greenery's mom. So we've got a handful of parents. We've had Mr. Jett, where's Mr. Jett? Mr. Jett, Steve Traster, Mary Gormley, John Phelan, all these people helping us get this off the ground. So the students are here tonight to tell you a little bit about what they're doing and why they're doing this and who they are. So they're going to introduce themselves and just take it away. Maureen, did you want to add anything to that?
No, but this is the 5th time, and
Yes.
it's gotten bigger and better every time. And a lot of it is due to the support that we're getting both from the administration, the students, the parents, and the community in general.
Oh, and if I can just add to that, thank you for reminding me. When we started this 5 years ago, this is the 5th walk. We started it because this committee said, oh my goodness, we've run out of money, we need to cut spring sports. And that just didn't seem fair, that we had some sports and clubs, but then we were going to cut. So the community really responded. And each year the community has really responded. We try very hard to not say, oh, we're cutting, the wolf is at the door, but we really count on this money, right, Matt? We really, really count on this money. We're doing this. The kids have to own the sports and clubs fundraising, and they are with this. We've asked sports teams to not do the candle drives, the cookie drives, the football cards, to just focus their teams on this. And the coaches have really come out for this, as have the club advisors and the school administration, in really pushing this. Grade 8 peer students are invited to participate, and last year we opened it up to them, and they did. But the support from the administration and from the Milton High School has just been unbelievable. So sorry to interrupt, I just wanted to add that. So now it's yours.
Hi, I'm Olivia Tabor.
gotta speak
I'm a
into the-
sophomore. I'm a sophomore, and I've played basketball and volleyball, and I do French club. I think that sports and clubs are a big part of the high school experience, and that we need enough money so that everyone can have that experience and, you know, be a part of something besides the academics.
Excellent. I think you
You
need
can
the
take
microphone.
the other mic comes out of the stand, and you can just pass it down.
Hi, I'm Connor Regan. I'm a senior at Milton High School. I play football, basketball, and baseball, and sports and clubs have been a big part of my high school experience, and I feel that they're important to the community and to the school.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Allie Jones, and I play field hockey and basketball, and I'm in the record club and outdoors club and Best Buddies, and the purpose of the walkathon is to help offset the cost of all high school sports and clubs. 1/3 of the budget is dependent on fundraising efforts, the biggest of which is the walkathon.
Hi, I'm Kendall. I'm a sophomore at Milton High. I play soccer and basketball, and I'm in the Spanish club and the outdoors club. And the walkathon's on Saturday, February 9th from 1 to 4 in the Copeland Field House. If you have high school neighbors and they ask you to sponsor them, like, please help. Many local businesses are also offering donations.
Excellent. And, you know, I would point out, all 4 of you have older siblings that did the exact same thing and did sports and clubs and helped with the fundraising. So it's a generational thing as well. I'm sorry, Maureen, I cut you off.
That's okay. And I noticed one thing. I have a daughter who's a senior, and she's studying for her exams tonight. But one thing I think that's real important about this is, as these kids are applying to colleges, if they don't have those sports, clubs, other activities on their applications, it's really going to put them at a disadvantage down the road when they're applying to colleges and they're competing against other schools that have all these programs available to them. So again, support us on Saturday, February 9th from 1 to 4, and we look forward to seeing everyone.
So we need help with the community, with pledges, with sponsoring the walkathon among the kids. You know, when the kids come to your door, your family, your friends. We do need help that day with registration. I know some of you will be at the warrant committee meeting, which I unfortunately will have to miss because I will be at the walkathon. But if there's anybody in the audience who would like to help, we have parents help us with the registration, and it's a couple hundred kids. It's a lot of kids to register in a very short time, so we really do need parents to help us with that. It's only for high school students to walk and to raise the money, and for grade 8. It's not for younger siblings. It's a high school thing, but the parents are allowed to come and help register kids, and then that's it. Ms. Gormley or Mr. Phelan, can you think of anything we forgot?
Our goal is to raise another $30,000 this year, which
Right.
is what we raised last year.
Yes. Yes.
I just want to say that I think it's, of all the fundraising that's done, kindergarten through grade 12, it's an unusual fundraiser. Again, the parents have to be complimented, the coordinating, the way you're organized, but it's run by Milton High School students for the funds, as been referred to tonight, that really are not for the extras, they're for the program, to run the athletic program and the clubs at Milton High. And to see the students out there and take ownership of this event, it is very, very significant. And I think that's why sometimes when you have these events, you have to have a year off and then a year on. But because it has the life of Milton High School students, as Mrs. Griffin said, it just gets bigger and better, and you expand and have more options. So on behalf of the schools and your fellow students, we're very, very appreciative.
Any questions or comments? Anything that committee members want to ask? Or if you do not,
Jet would like to ask a question.
I would just like to add, we have a lot of teacher support for the program as well.
Thank you.
I think it's important to note that the teachers do a talent show in support of the clubs and activities. A lot of the teachers that participate in that are not club advisors, nor are they coaches, but they see the importance and the value the clubs and sports or the athletics bring to the school community. And I would say this for any kid that's not engaged in a club right now. The hope is we get everyone involved. And so it doesn't matter what sport, what club, what grade level in terms of the high school, or I should say 8th grade to 12. We want everybody to get involved. I think it's a very, very important opportunity for us to showcase some community pride, but more importantly, some school pride.
and I did get a really nice compliment from my older son, who isn't always prone to compliments, and he said, you know, Mom, you guys have really made the walkathon fun. We have a dodgeball competition against the faculty, we have badminton, we have ping pong, we're having a dance-off, tattoos, not real ones. What else am I missing? Oh, 3-point basketball thing, hot shot contest that Mr. Jett thinks he's going to win. So there's a lot of activities for the kids to do. The marching band starts it off, the cheerleaders, the dance team, they'll all be there. Hopefully the mascot will be there. So we have a lot of really fun things that are happening. Did I forget anything, leave anything out? It's like the highlight of your year, right? Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay. If you do not have high school neighbors, how would you go about how do some of the parents of maybe elementary children would like to sponsor because they want sports for their kids when they get to high school and not have them cut? So is there a place they can, parents could contact the high school or, okay.
A check made out to Milton High School and given to the superintendent's office, collected by Matt.
Okay, great.
Good question. Anything else? Thank you very much, guys. You did a great job. I know you have to go home and study for exams, so thank you for coming out. Thank you, Maureen. Good job.
A+. Next, I'd like to invite to join the school committee at the table, the Milton High School team, under the leadership of Principal James Jett, to address tonight the Milton High School Program of Studies and feedback on our Milton High School's first professional development half-day. So welcome, Mr. Jett. And Mr. Jett, I'll let you make introductions with Ms. Cruiser and Ms. Walsh.
Joining me this evening is Michelle Cruiser, Milton High School Vice Principal, along with Math and Business Department Head, Courtney Walsh. So first of all, I just want to thank you for the opportunity to present to you this evening. I want to start off with the Professional Development Day. Back on September 9th, we came before you to do a presentation, a proposal asking for your endorsement of a pilot program to give us 5 early release days that commence January 9th. And we reported back to you on November 7th to give you a follow-up on where we were and to respond to some of your questions. January 9th was our first session, and I wanted to say to all of you, on behalf of the faculty and staff, thank you very much for your endorsement of that. We appreciate the support for the investment, not only in the professional development of our teachers, but we look forward to some positive outcomes from that opportunity. I presented or forwarded to you in advance an agenda and some of the activities that our faculty and staff engaged in, but the biggest one was the collaboration on the midterm exams. What we wanted to do is make sure by department our teachers were engaging in, encouraging the kids to really engage in some rigor within every content area. Teachers engaged in sharing best practices. I shared with you a couple of quotes that we talked about, but the most important thing was the nice kickoff. The kickoff We had in the auditorium, which we had Margaret Gibbons, who spoke on behalf of the association, and really hammered home and sent home a message that this was an investment into our teachers. And we knew it was a concern by some committee members, and we took in consideration possible concerns by the community of releasing students early. I will say this, one concern was the transportation. We did not have one complaint about the transportation. We did have one request, and that was because we had to modify bus routes. We had a student that was, the bus stop was rather a good distance from the home, but we were able to work that out. In terms of kids hanging around, that was not an issue, a non-issue. I'm sure a couple of local businesses, especially the eateries, enjoyed that because kids made it to East Milton. But I will say this, the kids really handled themselves in a professional way, and we were able to get down to business as early as possible. So Margaret Gibbons kicked off, talked about the association. We gave the history of the NEAS to all of our staff, but in particular our new faculty and staff. And I would say it was an overall great day. I could go into greater details. I think we provided you that information by department. We're looking for our follow-up day, which is February 6th, which we will look at more data analysis, looking at our PSAT data, a follow-up to our mid-exam data. But we're also working on a rubric to measure the 21st century learning expectations, which we talked about at great length. The 2 sessions we're here, not just what are you doing, how are you measuring what you're doing is success. So we're developing an initial rubric. We will be passing that out to departments, asking them to take a look at it, providing some sample lessons that kind of fit in that, and then we'll hopefully do another follow-up at some point. I'm not sure if you guys wanted to add something from your perspective.
I just want to say that I had the chance to
Oh, sorry.
I had the chance to go around to some of the different departments during the meeting time, and I just saw a lot of great work between the teachers. In some cases, the teachers had the chance to work together unlike they ever had done before. You know, they've done it on the fly in the hallway, you know, that type of thing after school really briefly, but to be able to sit down for a long extended period of time and really talk about what's going on in the classroom, their instructional practices, what's going to be assessed on the mid-year. It was just great. It was an incredible conversation I saw.
And just to follow up on all of that, I know particularly the math, the business, and technology departments, the teachers were just so grateful to have that time. Just like Michelle was saying, you know, a lot of these teachers are struggling to find the time to meet with certain colleagues, especially if they don't have the same planning time or duty period. And so to have everybody in the exact same room to figure out, okay, I need to work on this and I need to work on this with you. And now we have the time to do that. There were a lot of rich discussions surrounding mid-year exams, accommodations for special education students, as well as looking at the curriculum and how these mid-year assessments are going to drive our curriculum. So I think it was time definitely well spent. And again, the teachers were just overwhelmingly grateful to have that time to collaborate with each other.
So I wasn't sure if anyone had any questions regarding that. We did do a pre-survey for our staff to find out what their needs were, and we followed up the professional development with a survey to get their feedback, and we felt it was important to do that anonymously so we could get some really valid information and feedback from our teachers. So we just wanted to share.
Ms. Sheridan.
I just wanted to say that I appreciated the level of detail that you gave us in the follow-up document. Just talking about, you know, the small group, the whole group, and really all the opportunities that were availed to teachers in addition to their individual comments. I think that was a great level of detail that you provided to us, so thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Thank you.
Can I just ask?
Oh, go ahead.
February 6th, and then what are the other dates?
It's the first Wednesday of every month. The only time that we changed it was the January date because we felt it was too close following a vacation, so we did it on the 9th.
First Monday of...
First Wednesday.
First Wednesday of every month from now until...
May.
Okay, just good to hear it.
And if anyone ever loses it, we have it published on the website. We'll continue to send reminders. We did a couple of phone alerts to make sure that parents were reminded as well, so they plan accordingly. And again, like I mentioned, I think it went very smoothly, a lot smoother than we anticipated. but it just goes to show the level of follow-through that the parents had, and we appreciate, and I should say that, I definitely want to share my appreciation for the parents as well, parents and guardians. I guess our next order of business is the proposal seeking your endorsement on the program of studies. I'm not sure how it was presented to the committee in previous years, but what we tried to do is just really highlight any changes, whether we deleted a course, added a course, or changed the name. And we'll talk a little bit about that. But before I do that, I want to emphasize it has no impact on graduation requirements. It does not cost the town, the district, any additional funds for any additional staffing. What we tried to do is look at and maximize the people that we already have on board as we have today.
The first course I want to talk about is a deleted course, which is macroeconomics and microeconomics at the honors level. We've decided to delete this course because it's on page 14 of your program of studies. If you want to turn to that page, we've had low enrollment over the last few years for that course, and instead of running that course, we've chosen to put in a different course called Introduction to Economics at the honors level. Because we have a few kids who enroll in the honors macro and micro every year, we were thinking we can take those kids and put them into the Intro to Economics course, along with some of the students from our Intro to Business course that we already run, which is a college prep level course, who might want to take an honors level course, and then use that as a feeder for the AP micro and macro. Right now, we don't really have a course to use as a feeder for that AP course, and that will be helpful, especially as we want to increase our AP scores in the micro and macroeconomics. So that's a deleted course for micro and macro, and a new course to replace that called Intro to Economics at the honors level. We also have a name change. It's on page 16. Formerly, the course was called Advanced Digital Video, but we're changing it to MHS Wildcat News, just to describe really what's going on in the course. In that course, they do provide video segments for the blog, Superintendent Gormley's blog, the MHS Happenings blog, and for the Milton Access TV. So it's a more appropriate description of the course with its new name.
And if I could add to that course, it's really taken a life on itself. And what I like about it is promoting what's going on in the school. The class this year will be doing a video for the walkathon, I believe. They've done it in the past, and I think it gives the kids a little more ownership on what's going on and what they want to promote. And so we think that it would be, although the course is relatively same, the change of the course description to really keep in line with what's happening currently in the digital world. The next course is the public forum debate. This is a very exciting course to me, and the reason why I say it's exciting because I see the fruits of the labor of our current debate teacher, Nick Fitzgerald, with the support of Nancy Warren. This was currently an unleveled 2.5 credit course or an unleveled 5 credit course. It's now going to be an honors level course because of the success that we're finding in the program. The kids have an opportunity not only during the school day, after school, to prepare and train, but also because of it's a co-curricular course, they're also required to do additional Saturdays. This year they've gone to Yale University, they've gone to a couple of different debates. They're looking to host the state debate here in March 23rd, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. So we're looking at good things to come from this course, and we think it's a nice opportunity to raise the bar in there. So we moved it from an unleveled to an honors level course. The next one is the AP Spanish. Now this one, I had a lot of conversation with Martine Fisher, who is the World Language Department head, and we really try to look at this with a fine-tooth comb. Anytime you're looking at eliminating the AP course is always a concern, but given the performance of the AP Lit over the course of the last couple of years, coupled with the fact that it's a course that's not consistently run on an annual basis, we thought we'd focus our energies on strengthening or bolstering up the AP language. In order to be successful with the AP Literature, we wanted to make sure that they had the strong foundation in the AP language. So our hope is we focus on the language, and then we look forward to reinstituting that AP Literature course over time. And so that was a tough one because it is an AP course, coupled with the fact that it is low enrollment. At the time, it was, I believe it's 8 students currently, and those students will be moving on.
In statistics, we have put in a new course called Statistics Honors Level. Statistics was formerly only offered as AP or as college prep. And in the college prep class, over the last few years, we've run about 3 sections, and there's a wide range of ability in that course. And there's some students who really could benefit for taking it for honors credit. So there won't be additional sections made. We plan on hopefully being able to run the college prep and honors in the same room, because it's actually nice to have the wide range of students together. But we actually want to give some of the students credit for honors because some of them can really handle the honors level work. The next course would be a deleted course, which is Comp Tech or Computer Technology. We are actually going to delete the full year course. There was formerly offered a 5-credit course and a 2.5 credit course. The full year course has had low enrollment, so we're going, very low enrollment, so below 5. So we're going to get rid of the full year course. The half year course has actually very high enrollment, so we're going to keep that, and then students can have the opportunity to take other electives.
Okay, and then, did you do computer technology?
Yes.
Okay. The other course is the Beginner's Guitar 2. And the reason why that might be an interesting one, we have a high interest in Beginner's Guitar 1. It's a very popular course. It also serves as a feeder for our after-school program. The kids could do solos, duets, and then part of a larger group. Very affordable for the students, but we saw that there was more of an interest swinging towards the guitar. It's one of the most popular ones, and so in lieu of songwriting, which is what the students had this year, we're switching over to Beginner's Guitar 2 to give the students an opportunity. Okay. Okay, in digital photography, again, excuse me, that's a name change for Photography 1 has been changed to Digital Photography. Similar to in line with the Milton Wildcats, we're just trying to move with the times and making sure that the kids get that opportunity to have those 21st century learning skills in that digital photography class, digital photography 2 class.
So our very last change is in the grade 9 math course offerings that we're proposing for next year's incoming 9th graders. It's as a result of our continued implementation of the new Common Core standards that will reduce the number of levels that our 9th grade students are being programmed into from 4 levels down to 2. And again, it's just solidifying our transition into the Common Core. And so we wanted to give you a little bit more background on how this decision was made. So I'd like to call up Leif Lagueros, the math curriculum coordinator at the middle school, to kind of give some background on an analysis of the standards, what our 8th graders are seeing, and how that's going to transition into 9th grade. And we're just going to pull up a presentation real quickly.
James's seat. Welcome, Life.
Thank you, Courtney. Hello, everybody. Nice to see you all. This slide around the analysis of the new curriculum frameworks is informed by a few things. One is that Courtney and I have been working very closely together this year to look at the new standards and think about implications for mathematics education generally and specifically in Milton. Of course, we work with teachers on a day-to-day basis, and we've designed and delivered professional development to them. Another perspective that I have is that up until July, I was working at the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. And I worked there for about 8 years, with the last 6 years of that in the capacity of the Director of Mathematics. So that gives me a perspective on this, I think, that's a little bit unique. I was working with these standards when they're in their very early draft form and have kept close watch on the conversations up until now. So I just want to make a few points that will lay the groundwork to explain the proposed course sequences that's on the next slide. So first of all, just to mention that these new standards were developed based on a goal of college and career readiness for all students. And that was set thinking about what students need to be able to do and know in the 21st century. And the idea was that they would be there by the end, in mathematics in particular, by the end of 11th grade. And then the standards were developed by sort of backwards design, backtracking from there to say, now what do students need to know in each grade previous to get them there by 11th grade. The result of that is that these standards are very rigorous. College and career readiness is defined not just in terms of topics, which go beyond where we may have thought students need to go before, but also the way that they're thinking about mathematics and being able to problem solve in applied ways, make connections, justify their reasoning, etc. And so starting very early, students in elementary school are focusing on a deep conceptual understanding of number, and things really begin to accelerate in middle school and in high school. And so a couple of different examples at a couple of grades just to help flesh this out a bit. In the new standards, by the end of 8th grade, students will have learned more algebra than ever before. And many people say that it's equivalent to what used to be called Algebra 1. I think it doesn't quite go that far, but it's pretty close, and it's equivalent, if not beyond, to what most students were learning in an 8th grade Algebra 1 class, for example. So now our students, by the end of 8th grade, will be doing what you could consider 8th grade Algebra 1. And all students will be doing that. In the past, in Milton, really only our most advanced students were doing that. So in some sense, we're bringing all students up to the level that our most advanced students were doing in the past. Another example is 11th grade. So this is by the end of their 3 years of high school coursework. The new standards, these students are almost ready for calculus. So they've gone beyond where students used to go by the end of, in a traditional course sequence, what would be called Algebra 2, so that they're closer to calculus than ever before. They certainly wouldn't need a full year of what used to be called pre-calculus to get them ready for that. So students are going farther in terms of topics. They're doing things at a much deeper level. Another thing to mention specifically about Milton is that the fact that we decided, I think a couple of years ago, to go with this sequence of Course 1, Course 2, Course 3, this integrated sequence. And I'll just say that being in on some of the early conversations around the standards that were very much internationally benchmarked and looking to make things more rigorous, this was the sequence that was preferred by the authors, by the developers of the standards. And at some points they were saying, let's just make everybody do an integrated sequence and just get rid of Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2 as an option. It was eventually decided that that would be too much of a radical change. So what they did is they put both of them out there as an option, but I do just want to give plaudits to Milton for going that route. I understand Michelle Cruiser was instrumental, and there's not a lot of districts around Massachusetts that are doing that, but Milton is very much ahead of the game as far as that goes. That's the preferred way, and to the extent that when the new assessments come out, and this is going to be school year 14-15, so not next year, but the year after, the new assessments will replace MCAS, and they've said to districts that at the high school level, they will assess at the end of each course. So instead of just having assessments K through 8 and then a 10th grade assessment, now there'll be assessments at the end of each course. In Milton's case, we'll take a Course 1 assessment, a Course 2 assessment, and a Course 3 assessment. The Course 2 assessment is designed to be around the 10th grade year, and that will be from everything we've seen in terms of the items that we've seen. They've started releasing prototype items, and the conversation, that'll be far beyond what 10th grade MCAS is now. So that's just to mention that not only in terms of topics, but as I was saying around the mathematical thinking, They're using innovative new items to try to really get at those things, and it's going to be a really rigorous, intense assessment. Even at the 10th grade level, the Course 3 assessment, which is designed for the 11th grade level, right now everybody's holding their breath because that's going to be even more rigorous, and more rigorous than any statewide assessment that Massachusetts has ever seen, really. So that has a lot of benefits. There's a lot of good things about that. I think Milton is well positioned. Not just because of the course 1, 2, 3 sequence that we've been implementing for the last couple of years, but also because of this new proposed sequence that Courtney's going to talk a little bit more about.
So in light of the analysis that Life was just talking about, what you see on the screen now is our proposed sequence for next year's incoming 8th and 9th grade students. So if you just start by looking at the headers, we are proposing this as a phase-in with next year's 9th grade students, and so when you're looking at the grade 10 and at the grade 10 and 11 course offerings, those really wouldn't be changing until school years 14-15 and 15-16. But this is the layout for next year's 9th graders. So as you can see, in 8th grade, we would remain at 2 levels, which we currently have in 8th grade, and all of our students would be taking that grade 8 Algebra 1, which is the new Common Core Math. And from there, again going back to my initial comment about the 9th grade course offerings reducing from 4 down to 2, the above level 8th graders would be programmed into Course 1 Honors, followed by Course 2 Honors and Course 3 Honors, where the on-level students would still be taking that same sequence, Course 1, Course 2, and Course 3, but it would be a college prep level course. The biggest change, looking at the screen, is the offerings for our above level grade 11 students who currently are taking a pre-calculus course as a way to get them prepared for calculus their senior year. But as Life had mentioned, the Course 3, specifically the honors level students, that course would encompass all of our traditional pre-calculus standards. And so I didn't put any year underneath grade 12 because our grade 12 course offerings really aren't changing with this new plan. We still have the same number of AP course offerings. Every single student still has the opportunity to make it up to the calculus level. We're keeping AP statistics and also still offering our honors calculus and other courses such as advanced quantitative reasoning. So again, this is showing a phase-in for next year's 9th grade students, which are reducing down to 2 levels. Their sequence would be Course 1, Course 2, Course 3, but keeping the 12th grade course offerings the same. And so this final slide is showing those changes as well. Again, just to reiterate, this is really in response to what we now know will be end-of-course assessments with the new assessment coming out in school year 14-15. So by having all of our students take Course 1, Course 2, and Course 3 in high school, they'll be in line with what the state had designed, and they'll be prepared for those assessments. Keeping the same number of AP classes and making sure that all students have the opportunity to go to an AP calculus course is still on the table. We're just preparing them a little bit differently in these integrated courses to get them to that point.
Any questions?
So questions.
Becky?
So can you go back to the slide right before?
Yep.
Just to clarify the statistics, because when you were going through the course selection bulletin, it said that statistics was only a honors level, or an honors level course has been added. So under statistics, is it AP, honors, and college prep? Are there 3 levels of that?
Yes, as long as the program of studies is approved, we will also have the honors in there as well.
Okay. Great.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Kelly, do you have a question?
I do. Thank you very much for this presentation. What is the graduation requirement for math presently?
4 years.
It is 4 years?
Yes.
Okay. And the way this is sequenced, there's no opportunity for students who are perhaps more advanced in math to jump ahead, at least the way I'm seeing it. So I guess I'm wondering about that. Like, for instance, if I can show my proficiency in grade 10, that I could actually take the next grade 11, would I have the option to, which would give me more options later on, for grade 11 and grade 12?
Sure. Every year, we usually have a handful of students who are sort of in that special category, and we certainly make accommodations for them. For example, this year we have, I believe, 6 junior students who are taking the BC Calculus course this year, and we're looking into alternative options for them in their senior year. So even though the opportunity to double up in, say, a geometry and an algebra 2 course is no longer there with these integrated classes, the same opportunities to skip over a course, to test out of a course, that sort of thing, would be looked at on a student-by-student basis. Absolutely.
And the reason I ask about it is because perhaps private schools aren't going down this route. And when we do some of that comparative analysis to decide whether I'm going with the public school or the private school, being able to explain that there are what may be considered more traditional opportunities for advanced classes in whatever topic we're talking about, but tonight, math, might be something that we make sure we're communicating well.
Sure.
The other thing is, I guess I get concerned, and maybe it's just that we are putting everyone in the same square. And, if we are now saying as a state that it will be a graduation requirement to be proficient by the time that we take that, what may be much more difficult grade 11 tests, right? I just get concerned about what are we setting ourselves up for? So I guess I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. In terms of where Milton is and where we're bringing students, recognizing that we still have, support groups at the middle school level so that we can get people keep them on track. And now we're even raising the bar, which is great, right? But it looks here very much like we have 2 tracks and we're basically pushing everybody up there, and what's going to be required to get everybody up there, I guess.
Sure. I will say that when Life and I were looking at our different options as to how we wanted to finalize the implementation of the Common Core, we had talked about some summer bridge programs that would allow students to either stay with their grade level, going back to your previous question, potentially moving to an upper level math course, switching from the college prep track to the honors track. But then again, we did also talk about potentially having course offerings that run concurrently with some of the college prep courses, sort of as an extra math class, whether it runs daily, every other day, that sort of thing. So exactly, support classes. So all of these ideas have definitely been discussed, and I think that we need to first see how our students do specifically next year with the incoming freshmen to see the level of need for those type of classes. The other thing, and I don't know if you want to jump in, is that I think that there's definitely a statement there that the state is saying by 11th grade we want them college and career ready. However, the students have an extra year after that, and so I can foresee, and certainly say if I'm wrong, some of our students may be needing 2 years to complete that final course 3. And with an end-of-course assessment, I think that there may be some potential for students to be taking that final assessment in 12th grade rather than 11th grade. So the state is sort of giving us 1 year leeway. We haven't seen these assessments yet, so we haven't heard that, but we do know that they're end-of-course assessments. And so if a student had to take 2 years to finish one of those courses, it could be a potential.
And I guess just on that, and the state will decide what it decides.
Right.
But right now, we have a 10th grade level, and it's
Yes.
what is the course that they take, the class that they take?
Well, the MCAS exam is covering Algebra 1 and Geometry.
Okay.
Yes.
Right. So, and this is raising the level, right? And raising the level, the standard, and then you really only have 2 years, where right now you really have 3 years, right?
So one point of clarification I should make is that the state has not yet decided what they're going to do with the 10th grade graduation requirement in terms of a statewide assessment. So that's actually ensconced in law, that it says there will be a 10th grade assessment to determine competency for graduation. So with these new end of course going through 11th grade, this has been a long-running conversation, but there's no decision yet about whether it will be at that 11th grade level, at that college and career readiness level, which would make sense in many ways, or whether it will be 10th. But that is something that will have to be decided by the legislature, not just the department. As to your point about students raising the expectations for all students, it's a very good one. You know, at the middle school, we have a lot of support programs in place. This is something that's that we're putting a lot of energy into. I will say that the standards themselves, I think, are helpful in that way. Something I didn't mention about the standards is that they are much more focused, particularly K through 8, in terms of having fewer topics that students are being asked to master so that teachers can go into them in much greater depth. So one easy example is that, you know, in K through 5 now, there's no statistics and probability. So there used to be expectations around that. Teachers would spend several weeks. The new standards say, let's get number down really, really well. Because what's happening with a lot of students is they're not understanding number well enough that when things get more abstract later, it begins to unravel for them. So the new standards focus on those things, K-5, and then in middle school, they bring in statistics and probability as applications of the number that students have mastered earlier. So teachers have more time to spend to get more in-depth in topics with students, and I think that will help a lot of students who right now are struggling either earlier or particularly as they get into more abstract math in secondary.
Ms. Jones?
Just one final question. Does this require additional materials, textbooks, supplies? And if so, what is the cost of the rollout of this program?
So we haven't costed that out at the middle school level yet. I will say that it will eventually require new materials to be done really well. One issue is that the textbook publishers themselves have not started putting out updated materials. And so I think just this year things are starting to come online, but the fact is that at the middle school level, the textbooks we have are not particularly well aligned to the new standards. So I will say that the teachers, the mathematics teachers at the Pierce Middle School for sure, I can speak firsthand, have been working day in and day out to develop materials, often in collaboration with each other, that match these new standards. So there's a lot of things that are coming out that are available online and things, but they take a lot of adaptation, of course, to bring alive in the classroom, and teachers are really putting forth a monumental effort. We can all be very proud of them. I've been in schools all over the country, as well as Massachusetts, and you couldn't ask for a better teaching force. But ultimately, once these new materials are available out there, I think it would be smart to take a look at them.
Thank you.
Ms. Bagley-Jones?
John? I guess my questions sort of follow up on some of that. I have questions about class sizes. I mean, coming away from this, more back to Milton High School, I have questions or concerns. I'm just curious as to class sizes in terms of these levels, on level and above level. What are we looking at for class sizes in general? And you may not be able to answer that, but that's a concern. If a kid's an on level, what class size are we looking at? Because just like there are kids who are above that level, there are kids that are above level. There are kids that are in between on level and above level. And what are we doing to help those kids? So if you're on level in grade 8, how do you get to honors or above or whatever, you know, when you get into grade 9 and grade 10? What's helping you move up? Because we don't want to go back to those two tracks. And I do feel like there are kids, I know there are kids in the middle of above and on level, and I am concerned that we're not helping them. Or maybe we are, but I'd like to hear more about that.
Sure. So I think that the biggest conversation that we've been having is implementing summer bridge programs for those students who are in grade 8 Algebra 1 on level and are interested in moving up to the honors level in 9th grade. So providing them with perhaps a 4-week course that will catch them up in terms of the standards that they missed being in the on level, so that they enter into 9th grade with the same background knowledge as their above level cohort. as well as summer bridge programs, again, throughout high school for kids who may need the extra remediation or pre-teaching to make sure that they are keeping up with the work, whether it be in an on-level track or an above-level track. So again, I think that our number one discussion right now is to looking at summer bridge programs.
Can I push back at that?
And I think, because you're probably going to push back on this, saying it's not fair for kids who are having difficulty to maybe extend it, but what we'd also like to do is develop those packets to give kids practice over the summer at their leisure, so there's no regression between June and September, and we hope to continue to do programs or supports like that as well.
If I can just ask
Go ahead.
what my pushback is, I'm in 8th grade. I really don't love math. I'm on level. I'm not giving up my summer to come to a bridge program, number one. Number two, if I'm struggling with some learning challenges, again, I'm singled out. I'm going to go to a summer bridge program. So it's not that I feel like we have to be really careful about identifying kids for Saturday programs and summer programs. These are the kids who don't love math. They're not interested. Like, hey, I'm going to get to go to summer school to get on a different level of math. They're not going to do that. So I don't really know what the answer is, but I guess I'd really push back and look at class size. If you've got kids that are struggling, what is the class size for those kids so that they can get the more individual attention, which will make them feel more confident and make them more interested because they won't be failing or hating math. No offense to the math teachers in the room, but not everybody loves math.
None taken.
Thank you. Sorry, Glenn. But so what are we doing to help those kids that isn't stigmatizing and setting them separate?
I'd like John.
First of all, I'd like to thank Courtney and Life because
Yes,
this
thank
work
you.
is very, very much cutting edge, and it is putting Milton, I believe, ahead of the curve in terms of mathematic teaching and learning that's very much on the edge of what the state is doing. To answer your question specifically, in the past, if you looked at that grade 9 flow chart, there would be 4 courses that students could take because a lot of students weren't doing well in 8th grade, and we had to kind of chunk them out into 4 different sections. By putting them in 2 sections from just a class size perspective, I think it will be much easier for the scheduling to be done as long as we know we only have 2 sections that we have to accommodate, because now we can balance our class size a lot better over 2 courses instead of over 4 different titled courses. I think our class size could be a little more consistent. Secondly, that group of students, if they don't want to go in the summer and achieve higher, first of all, if they do want to achieve higher, to jump a group, because it does dawn on them by 8th, 9th, or 10th grade that they would like to make that jump, we have access to different opportunities to do so they can take advantage of those. For those who may not want to take advantage of that, I would say out loud that our on-level group of students who are, quote, regular kids, regular math kids, are going to end their 8th, 11th grade with Algebra 2, trigonometry, and statistics in hand. And this is a case, a very rare case, and we talked about this when Michelle presented this with John Drotter a few years ago, where the Course 1, 2, 3 model is a very rare opportunity where all children benefit at a high level of rigor. Before, we used to lose students in grades 7 or 8 or 9 and never really get them out of Algebra 1. This leaves no child backwards. Every child will incorporate their Algebra 1 geometry, statistics, and Algebra 2 over 3 years, and we will have more students overall completing that trajectory of academic experience in math than we will have before, because each one of those grades was chunked out because we had pieces of students achieving and not achieving. So I believe the comprehensive spiraling approach that we have in the Course 1, 2, 3 will really, really benefit all students. So I would think we will have less of those. For the students that are high flyers, we still have the same array of AP courses offered to them in 12th grade. We have the ability for them to double up in 11th grade if they choose to do so, to Member Kelly's point. And they're getting pre-calculus built into their Course 3. So that's the other side. So when we do look at what do we offer at Milton High that is in comparison and or better than what you could get at a private school, all of our students, and most of them are coming out with a pre-calculus experience and able to access all of that high-level math in 12th grade. Secondly, not too long ago, I had a son who wanted to look at private school, and we went to a private school where in 9th grade they were teaching Algebra 1, and it was our 8th grade math book. And so I looked at it and I said, wow, buddy, you're going to get that. You're doing that, and you're going into 9th grade. So now we have all of our 8th graders doing Algebra 1 in 8th grade which I believe is a very increased level of rigor for all students, and then we are supporting them through that Algebra 1, 2, 3, or that Course 1, 2, 3, while spiraling that curriculum. So they're learning Algebra 1 and Algebra 2 and all those standards simultaneously, bit by bit, with longer time to go into them in detail. And so I think that it's very rare where you can say you're supporting all students and still keeping a high level of rigor or increasing the level of rigor at the beginning of the sequence and at the end of the sequence. So I think that this is ambitious. I think that it's exactly where Milton should be. I think our students can do the work, and I think our teachers are working hard to be prepared to engage them. And I'm really excited to have our school district be on such cutting-edge waters. In terms of how do we want to support students if in fact they are falling through the cracks, we did apply for a grant with Newton North, Newton South, and Brookline called the Calculus Project. We are waiting to hear back whether or not we are going to get that grant monies with those 4 districts that would provide additional funding for summer cohort studies for students to get pre-teaching, i.e. to get ready for any change they would like to have in their upcoming September coursework. So between that and some of the money in our advancement budget, where we are trying to provide summer and after school and before school support and targeted support for students, that fits hand in hand with trying to make sure that there's nets in between each academic year for students to make that jump or maintain that high level of rigor if they decided to stay in the college prep. So this work with Courtney and Life in consultation with obviously Mr. Jett at the high school, Karen Spalding at the middle school, Michelle Cruiser being a big part of the original document, and John Drotter, to give him credit in his retirement. This is, I'm sorry? And Holly Concanon at the elementary level. This is a very K-12 set of work that I think puts the district at a very good spot. And it's a nice way to highlight what we all have to start to think about is this PARCC assessment is going to be a little different. I think a lot of school systems are going to be left in a very difficult spot when the first scores come out after the spring of 14 tests are given. And I think that in math we are going to be well positioned in the next few years.
If I could just expand up on that a little bit, that grant, if we get it, also provides additional tutoring after school throughout the year, all the way up until their junior year, until they successfully complete a pre-calculus calculus course. So that's another benefit for them. The other piece is, I want to say, your question is very legitimate, and I'm sure it's a question that probably comes up in our professional development meetings, but that's what that collaborative time allows our teachers to talk about. How can we differentiate our instruction? What are the best practices? Looking at the data, what are the areas of weaknesses, and how can we bolster them up? So your point is well taken. It's part of the conversations that not only in math but in other departments people are having as well. So I just wanted to add that piece as well.
Mr. Walker?
So I think this is pretty exciting, and it's obvious you've done quite a bit of work in terms of thinking about how to position us for success. The question I have is kind of a broader one about if we look at math performance at the elementary levels, and if we look at elementary performance and look at math performance at the middle school levels, using what MCAS data we have, there's probably some percentage of students that have performed at the needs improvement and warning level. And what's the strategy for moving those students into a satisfactory performance level by the time they get to grade 8?
So I'll say again that the new standards really support that kind of work.
Mm-hmm.
The new standards are not about purely procedural fluency, although that's a big part of them. They're about conceptual understanding, and there's a lot of work done with students, say, around visual models, for example, very early on, so that students are able to really move through concrete representational abstract strategies. In order to do that, teachers will need professional development. And so we've already started that in earnest, both directly during our professional development days, during summer work, and during common planning time. So I think it's going to be a combination of professional development, hopefully eventually bringing in some new materials that align with these standards, and then thinking carefully about our support programs. So I'm on the Proficiency Gap Task Force, and we're actually doing an analysis that looks specifically at those students to think about who they are, what kind of programming they're involved in now, and how that can be improved. And I think it's a little premature to make any conclusions at the moment, but I know that that's a huge priority here. And I think the new standards support that work, as well as thinking about the programming that will go alongside them.
That's great. Have we started that professional development at the elementary level as well?
Yeah.
I could actually speak to that. Ms. Concanon has been up to date on the Common Core, which realigned some of the math at the elementary level per Mr. Lagaris's stating that earlier. She has spent the last 2 summers aligning. She has unit assessments at the end of each unit. So at the elementary level, students in grades K through 5 have about 5 common assessments that are consistent by grade. Those assessments have been upgraded to reflect the Common Core standards, and therefore the lessons that back up to that have been supported as well. I think more so than aligning the curriculum and making the assessments fit to the new Common Core is that what we're really seeing is that teachers need more content area training at the elementary level. So we really want to hire and be aware that our staff needs to become more content rich in what they know and understand, because you'll see in our grade 1 presentation that we do, and we'll send the video clips to you. We have a French lesson and an English lesson in math at the 1st grade level, and they're doing geometry. We just had the meeting today, and so we see a video clip with students actually doing shapes, counting, and learning very, very rigorous math concepts and standards at a very young age. So that work has started. It definitely needs to continue. Fortunate that we're lining up everything correctly and we're assessing everything at a high level, but I think the next step will be to provide more content area training and professional development strategies for our teachers so that they feel comfortable in front of that curriculum every day.
Just a clarification and then one more question. The clarification is, doesn't this, what Life and Courtney are talking about, change the nature of some of the Common Core work that we're doing, or were we already doing that work?
We were already doing that work. We've known pretty much the Common Core, what it will look like for about the last year and a half.
Okay.
The PARC assessment, what's new now is how it's going to be assessed at the end of every grade, 3 through 11, and what those assessments will start to look at has finally crystallized. So that is kind of the newer information in the last 6 months.
Okay. And then a much easier question. On the grade 9 and grade 10, the honors and college prep courses have the same title. Does the honors course go into more depth, or is the content different, or both?
I would say it's a little bit of both. Thinking about the fact that our Course 3 honors students need to incorporate an entire pre-calculus course into it, beginning with the Course 2 and certainly Course 3, the honors level students will be learning more mathematics. Particularly at the 8th and 9th grade level, it would be about the same amount of standards, but the depth that you're going into and the type of questions that we're showing each level student would be the differentiation between the levels.
Ms. Padera,
Just have a couple technical questions. We were talking about how students get placed in each level. Whose decision is that? Parents? Is it a decision we make together with teachers?
So the course recommendation process, particularly for this year, is that it begins with the teacher recommending what he or she thinks each student should be placed into for next year. Those then get printed and given to the students, so the students can then have a conversation with the teacher and ask any questions. Why did you think I should be in this course versus this course? Those then go home to the parent so that the parent can look at it and have additional conversations with the teacher, with the guidance counselor, and then at the very end, the student would be programmed for next year. So it is a collaborative effort.
Can I add one thing also? You know, there are times when sometimes parents want to push their kids a little bit further, and so they will override a recommendation. That does happen. We do keep those on record, and we keep an eye on those students in terms of making sure that they're set up to enter a higher level course. We do have summer work for all our math courses straight across the board, and the curriculum documents are so clearly delineated, like what's in each course. We know if a kid wants to move from a college prep level course to an honors course, we know exactly what they're going to need to catch up on and what they're going to need to learn to be successful in that honors level course. And when they enter into any of these courses, we always have a benchmark test right in the beginning, so we know where the students are, and it doesn't mean that we switch them down, we push them down. That's not what that's for. It's just to diagnose them and say, you know, here are your weaknesses, this is what we need to work on. You know, maybe set up after school time with the student to try to get them caught up, etc. So that's what that's for, not to push them out anywhere, but just to help them succeed.
And that recommendation process has always been the same, pretty much at the middle school level, in the high school level. One of the things that you should know, if the teacher's sitting before a parent and a student with data to somewhat justify the recommendation level and the parent overrides it, there's an understanding that the student will at least have to stay in that course for at least a quarter. It'd be very difficult 3 weeks in, 4 weeks in to kind of jump out of course.
Just one. So, and then my other question is we're talking about higher level students. Do you have students now, or will this be available to them to take two classes at once in math? Like if one student, they wanted to take 2 AP classes, for instance, they wanted to take statistics. Do you have students that do that now? Or?
Absolutely. We do have students doubling up in math right now, particularly with the AP statistics. So students will either double up their junior year with currently a pre-calculus and an AP statistics course, or if they don't choose to do that their junior year, they also have the opportunity to double up with AP Calc and AP Statistics. We also have some students who will double up in Honors Calc with AP Statistics, or a college prep level pre-calc with AP Statistics. So it's typically the AP Statistics course that's doubled up junior or senior year. And that'll continue to happen even with the Course 3.
In very unique cases, we've had some students double up Course 2 and Course 3 because it's a study of different functions for the algebra part. And so that's possible, but that's very
rare.
Unique cases.
Okay, and just one last technical question. The AP Calculus, do you rotate those classes, or are they offered the same year, the BC and the AB?
The same year. They're offered every year.
Ms. Sheridan, question.
I just have to say I'm so proud of this leadership team and this work that you're presenting to us tonight. It's really outstanding. As I sat and listened to it all, and as a teacher and a parent and wearing many different hats here, I think that there's so much value to this. And the only area where I could see it might be a challenge being ahead of the game is that if we had students transfer in. So I'm just wondering about students who maybe come in 10th grade and didn't have the benefit of Course 1 in its entirety, presented in that way, and may have come from a more traditional programming. How are we going to accommodate those students?
The first thing we usually do is obviously look at their background. We know that more often than not they're coming from a traditional classroom. Looking at their background, then having them take some of our end-of-year assessments, some of our final exams, to see which course they most fit into. But I think it also depends on when they're joining us. So thinking about the integrated classes, in particular, looking at Course 2, which is a study of Algebra 2, then Geometry, and then Statistics, it depends on, are they coming to us halfway through the year where we've moved on to the Geometry portion, and maybe that student has already seen Geometry. So that would be a deciding factor into whether they went into Course 2 or Course 3. So it depends on the time of the year, how well they've done on our traditional final exams to see if they could sort of test out of that course. And that's really where we have some of the students doubling up in Course 2 and Course 3. Like Michelle was saying, it's for very specific cases, and that would certainly be one of the cases. So to make sure that they finish the Geometry, which ends in Course 2, but also keep up with the Algebra 2, which is ending in Course 3, those students might be doubling up in Course 2 and 3.
So on any given year, there may be students from different grade levels in different courses.
Yes. Our goal with reducing the number of course offerings from 4 down to 2 is to sort of mainstream those courses. So it is typically 9th graders in course 1, 10th graders in course 2, et cetera. But certainly transfer students would be the exception to the rule, or the students who might be skipping a course because they've quote-unquote tested out of it and that sort of thing would be the exceptions to the rule.
One quick follow-up question is, and I keep coming back to the class size, and I have concerns about that, but I have heard from kids and parents that some of the on-level classes are smaller than the above. So it would be very interesting to keep track of that, because I do think that that's the best thing to help kids, is the smaller class size. And the other thing that I've heard from kids and parents alike is that when the math teacher has a relationship with the kids and he or she recommends tutoring, it goes over much better. In terms of the stigma of it, because it's seen as just, oh yeah, this teacher cares about me and thinks tutoring would be helpful. So
Absolutely.
There are
Right.
some folks that do that very successfully, but I would be very curious to keep hearing about class size.
I'm sorry, we've been very cognizant of that. Courtney and Michelle, part of the leadership meetings we have every Thursday, that has been a charge along with Ken Auburn, who's here this evening. He's part of that meeting, talking about it. We're trying to do projections now in terms of planning for next year, knowing that the current grade 8 class size 266 right now. And so we're trying to figure that out. We're trying to look at that. But once we sift through everything and we see where we land with a budget, and we can start planning a little more closely, and we'll start to look at that.
And I was just going to say, even going back to your question earlier, our lowest level 9th grade classes right now are absolutely the smallest classes that we offer in the math department. So those students would be in with more, their class sizes are certainly going to raise next year. But I think that overall, the class sizes are going to level out. And by leveling out, we're hoping that we do have an extra section or 2 free for a teacher to maybe start teaching one of those remediation classes or review classes that they have at the middle school, where maybe some of those lowest students can receive their extra support during the school day, which is going back to your issue of, not everybody can work on math in the summer, and those students would be with a regular math teacher, so somebody that they're potentially already comfortable with.
Great.
And those support classes at the middle school level, class size is one of the things that we watch very carefully, and that's part of the point there, is to have them in very small classes, like 10 students, where they can get that sort of individual attention.
Great, thank you.
Ms. Kelly, you had another question?
So some years back, and I can't remember when, and I can't even remember the name of the program, we had a math program that was somewhat integrated, but very hands-on, project-based, teamwork, et cetera.
Interactive
There you
math
go.
program.
See, this is my old brain.
Oh, that's a long time
So,
ago.
not, well, it's
Sorry.
all relative. It's all relative. So that methodology of reaching students and applying concepts to projects, is that part of the way, or the anticipated the way this curriculum will be delivered? Because certainly to hear people who had participated in those programs, there were rave reviews because they were, it was just well received. And I'm just wondering if that's part of the way these courses are being planned.
I was part of the curriculum writing for the courses for course 1, 2, and 3, so I can answer to that. We've had a lot of teachers. We still have a lot of teachers in the department who participated, who are teachers in the IMP program, and we actually have used units from the IMP curriculum in the course 1 and 2 and 3 curriculum documents. So we have incorporated it, and we plan to even include more as we develop the courses even more.
Thank you.
My turn? All right. Well, first off, on the professional development, I would just want to say I'm not at all worried that our teachers are going to get the professional development they need to pull this off. I have, the collaborative I direct has 150 teachers coming 4 times this year and 4 times next year to learn how to do the content with certain practices. And Michelle has been a presenter at it. Holly Cannon's being a presenter this year. And I think I've identified a couple more for upcoming years. So the folks we have are very knowledgeable in this. If any district is able to pull this off, I'm convinced it's Milton that's going to be able to do it. I'm not at all worried about getting in this position. And I'm also very happy with the Course 1, Course 2, Course 3. As I've said before, the United States is a real outlier in the Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2, and Pre-Calculus model. There's like 2 countries in the world that do that. And no one really knows what pre-calculus is, as someone who's taught it for a living for years. It's that et cetera of stuff you didn't get before that you need to get into calculus, and it varies in every school, in every college, in everywhere. I mean, it's just that et cetera course. And the nice thing about the new standards is that it mainstreams it all into some coherence. And going back to something that was said before, algebra has always been a sticking point of a lot of our kids. And the fact is, not everyone is terribly abstract at at age 14. And for a lot of the kids, having the geometry there is the hook that gets them. But if they can't get to the geometry until they've struggled their way through the algebra, many of them never get to the geometry. So having this circular approach to it, just driving your way up through all the subjects, really, I think, engages a lot more kids than the traditional one. So I'm looking forward to see how this works out. As someone who had kids in the IMP program, I remember some of those. My problem with the IMP program was it had some great practice, but sometimes it lacked a little of the techniques. I mean, they lost a little. You know, we talk about drill and kill. We don't like doing those 1,000 exercises over and over again, but it actually implements sort of the other way. And the idea of the standards here is to sort of really coalesce those two, so they actually get the skills, but they also get a feeling of what it is they're doing. So I'm looking forward to see how this rolls out.
Hi, Michaeline.
Go right ahead.
Besides the expertise that I think the school committee and the viewing public can see that we have in the Milton Public Schools, the passion about math. And so if you have this expertise and this passion, so I'll tell you a little secret. After we have these meetings, I call our school committee resident, and we actually had him into one of the meetings. So led by John Phelan, and the work recruiting these individuals, and the way that you work together, and the expectations you have for the teachers, your response coming in, the professional development, your work with students. I'm very, very grateful. And when you have this high standards and you have this passion, and philosophically, for me, it's so much better to not have 4 strands where children are left behind. And all of these individuals have the philosophy. You're talking about the bridge. There's the opportunity for everyone. The goal is honors calculus. And to have that expectation of algebra at grade 8, and to have supports all the way through, because it's just like beginning reading. Where is the book that when you're 5, you've broken the code? So for some children, it takes longer, and to stay with every single child and give them the supports, and to create this map, I'm very, very grateful on behalf of the children. And again, I think it's one of the best school committee meetings we've ever had. It's, it's what these individuals on the committee are passionate
We're
about.
talking about math.
I know. And I think it's good for the viewing public to see the continuity, to understand that this is a K-12 initiative, and led by John Phelan, along with Life and Courtney, and Ms. Cruiser, James Jett, Karen Spalding. We have some very talented people who math is their passion, and Dr. Drotter was also part of that team. And John leaves every one of these meetings, and you'll come up with a plan for success for Milton Public School children. Very, very grateful. And it was an outstanding presentation to all of them.
Mary has one more question.
Sorry, just one last question. So when we talk like elementary level, the circular or spiral curriculum means that, I don't know how long the time length is, but a couple weeks on this, couple weeks on that, couple weeks on that, and then I come around again. Is that the same vision for this, i.e. it's a couple weeks, or is this within the year, it's a third, or however you break it up?
Can I just mention that the new standards are pretty clear, K-8 certainly, that it does not spiral. It's built on a more mastery philosophy where each year teachers own a few topics, they get into them very deeply and with a lot of breadth, and then it's expected that students have mastered those and can move on to the next year.
But for high school, I guess is what I'm
Right,
asking.
so thinking about like Algebra 2, geometry, and statistics, I think it's more in line of a third, a third, a third, even though it doesn't work itself out that way.
But, yeah,
But yeah.
thank you.
Thank you guys very much.
Thank you very, very much. So you had to vote?
Yeah, while we're at this point, I think it'd be, we have to annually vote the program of studies, so I think this is a reasonable point at which
But-
to do it.
Are we going to still, I have some questions about this, not related to math.
Go right ahead.
Okay, so is this list that we got from you, Mr. Jett, here, is that in here now?
That's pretty much all of the changes that it will be incorporated in the book that you have before you.
Okay, so they're not in the book yet, they're here, but they will be in
They
the book?
are.
They are.
Oh, they are, and that's
Some
what I
have
was...
been deleted. The
Right,
ones that
I
have
was
been
trying to go
deleted are
through
out.
it, and then I
The
just
ones
figured...
that I'm sorry.
It's
we had
easier
to-
just to ask you.
know, I was saying to Mrs. Cruz, I said, my goodness, we forgot to put the page numbers on them to make it
That's
easier for
okay.
you.
That's
I
okay.
could email it to you, or we could give you the
Nope,
page numbers
that's not
now.
even my question. I just wanted to
Okay.
make sure I wasn't
Yep.
looking at the same thing. So I look at, and I guess size of classes is my theme tonight, because I am very concerned about the size of classes in the language program. Particularly the Spanish program on level and above has been very, very high over the last few years. 33 kids in a classroom. I went to open house. I couldn't find a seat in the classroom. There were so many kids in some of the classes, and that's been true from my own personal experience as a parent for the last 4 years. Some of the classes are combined. And I'm not getting into how many Spanish do we have, how many Latin, how many French, but I am a little concerned about that, and we're talking about cutting the Spanish AP, which is fine because of the number of students, and I do appreciate the honesty when you talk about that they're relatively weak scores in the last year's AP Spanish literature class. Like, I appreciate that being right out there. Like, nobody's covering anything up. It's like, this is why we cut it. We need to get back to the basics. But my concern is class size in the Spanish classes. I have no idea of what they are in the French classes, but that's a concern for me. They've been consistently overcrowded now for at least 4 years. Actually, this is the 5th year, I don't know, 4 or 5 years. And there used to be Spanish 6, and that got cut, and Spanish 5, above level, honors, whatever it was, got put in with on level. So you had half of a class of 33 that were above level and half that were on level, and there weren't enough desks in the classroom. There were 33 or 34 kids in that classroom. So that's been happening fairly consistently among my kids and their friends and parents that I know. So I'm concerned about that, so I want to put it out there. And I don't think you can answer it tonight, but I would like to know
I can't
about
answer
that.
that tonight, but I will say to you very explicitly that Superintendent Gormley, Assistant Superintendents John Phelan and Matt Gillis, myself, and the department heads have been looking very closely at the class size. That has been a charge for the last 2 months in terms of the leadership meeting to make sure that the class size is really paid attention to. We will be looking at that very closely. But I need to be straightforward and honest. When you look at the presentation, we start talking about potential cuts.
I know.
I don't know what that's going to net. I don't know where we're eventually going to end up, but that will have an impact on some of the class sizes. In regards to the world language compared to other world language, unlike the French immersion where the kids matriculate from elementary all the way up to the high school, it's very difficult for someone, to your point, moving into the district to jump into the French immersion program. So oftentimes the language of choice, if they decide to take a language of choice, will be Spanish, and we're trying to offer a program that's sufficient for everyone. And so, but we'll continue to look at the class sizes. I can't give you that today, but that is something that's definitely on our radar.
And if I can just follow up with that, Glenn?
Okay.
I would really like to see, and again, it's not a Spanish, Latin, French issue, but you're right, the kids moving in are going to have to be in the Spanish classes. So what are we looking at for class
They do
sizes?
They're able to take Spanish.
I'm sorry, they're not able to
take
take immersion,
Right.
French.
Correct. So
Right.
there's Spanish offered, there's Latin offered, and there's French as a second language offered at the high school. So there's 3 different languages that they're able to access.
Right.
At the high school level, most students coming in have already had a language offering at a high school level. I wouldn't say that necessarily at the middle school. We have a lot of schools, a lot of middle schools don't have language to the degree that we do, but there are 3 landing points for them if they come into the Milton Public Schools in high school in terms of world language. And I will go back 3 years and get class size programmatically with Dr. Fisher to be able to provide for you, just so we can reassess. And I too appreciate that under Mr. Jett's leadership, the administration is being very clear and efficient with reviewing class size in terms of whether it's or not it's worthwhile for the district to put money towards courses that aren't filled, and that they're working towards making their schedules more efficient. So, and then replenishing them with other courses that may be of value to their students.
Because in a quick count, you know, the French classes, there are many more French classes offered. There's even one more Latin offered than Spanish. So what's the pool of kids in each of those? Are we looking at over-enrollment in all the language classes?
I will say this. If you recall back in 2008, 2009, unfortunately, and I'm talking about cuts, it was a proposal to cut Latin because the numbers were low. But since then, the numbers have increased significantly in the Latin program. So that's why you're probably seeing the influx in the Latin at the high school level and a little bit of a decrease in the Spanish there. So there has been a significant shift. I don't want to speak for the middle school right now, but I do know that you probably have seven maybe periods, or maybe 7 or 8 periods of Latin, if I'm not mistaken. Whereas a few years back, there was 1 period or a couple of periods per grade, 5. With just Tamara Bauer teaching them. So it has been an increase there. So when that increases, you might see a little bit of a decline somewhere.
But I mean, if there's 10, 10, and 10 sections, are they all 33, 35, 22? I mean,
I'll
what's...
report out that at the
Yeah,
next
okay,
meeting.
thank you, and I'll stop.
Okay.
But
No,
I
no.
am very concerned about the class size
Okay.
in the languages and in the math. Thank you.
Again, it's a huge issue for us to examine class size in every discipline, so you're correct.
So on that, I would entertain a motion to approve the high school program of studies.
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Sheridan, second by Mr. Walker. Any other discussion? Ms. Kelly?
Just what are the budgetary implications of any of these new classes that are being introduced?
You addressed that at the beginning.
Yeah, at the
Sorry,
beginning-
I apologize, I was late.
That's
That's all right.
I just
It's
asked
on
you
the
to
cover. There's
recover.
Net neutral.
No
there's
net.
no.
Yeah.
Got it. Great.
Any other questions, comments?
Thank you.
Hearing none, all those in favor? That's unanimous. We also need to vote to waive the speech as a graduation requirement, because that technically is in our policy, that speech is a high school graduation requirement, and for the last several years, on a year-by-year basis, we have been waiving that.
So moved.
So the motion is to waive the speech, waiver of speech as a graduation requirement for the year 2013, 2014. It was moved by Mr. Walker.
Second.
Second by Ms. Sheridan. Ms. Kelly?
Can I ask that we sort of get a plan to finalize this? Either it is no longer part of our anticipated graduation requirements, or we find out a way to, because I think what we had talked about in the past was we were going to look to almost each subject to make sure that that component was part of the way we expected our classes to run. So if we could just get finality on this.
Within the month.
And the other question I just have is technology essentials a new term, or was I just not paying attention last?
No, it's the tech essentials. It was there last
Yeah, that course was there for the school year, so it came by last program of studies last year. And that's the computer class that the students take, that all the freshmen take, and it covers Web 2.0 information, and also Microsoft Word, Excel, PowerPoint, all the basics, so for what they'll need for the rest of high school.
Right, and I see that as a course. It's now in the graduation requirements. I'm just wondering, if the school committee ever voted to add it in, or whether it was previously named something else? I guess I just don't remember it being there before.
I'll research that.
Yeah,
Right.
We'll have to have our policy committee look at our policy.
And I remember about this speech. I'll follow up on that.
Okay, great, thank you.
Decline certain things.
All right, so it's been moved and seconded to waive speech as a graduation requirement for next year. Any other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor? That's unanimous as well. And I think that takes care of the high school. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Next, I'd like to ask to join us at the table Chairman Pavlicek, Technology Director Bob Pattison. Mr. Pattison joined us at the last meeting. We have a technology plan that has to be voted upon. You had several questions. Mr. Phelan and Mr. Pattison followed up on all those questions, and they have included in your school committee packet sent to you last week material, and Mr. Phelan and Mr. Patterson will present now.
Sure. I'd like to thank Bob for the work that he did over the last week or so. What we attempted to do is take your edits and questions that were asked at the January 9th meeting and incorporate them into the tech plan that Bob will present momentarily, and then also just identify some of those questions explicitly in a memo that I provided in the green folder, and also in a memo which accompanies the updated technology plan that's in your packet. So Bob is going to address some of the equipment-related questions, and then I will address some of the teacher expectation questions, because that would technically be out of Bob's realm, but we did update some of the reporting to the state in that area as well. So I'm going to let Bob talk about the equipment-based questions and edits to the technology plan, so we can vote it. And then I would just like to weigh in quickly on some of the questions and some of the data I found out, in particular to our teacher participation in our administrative expectation around use of technology in Milton Public Schools. Bob?
Thank you. There was a question that had come up about the possibility of loaning or donating the older computers in the district to children that may not have them at home, and I did do a little bit of research on that as well. I sent an email to tech directors throughout the state, and I didn't get a lot of responses, but those that did respond, none of them have that type of program. They were pretty much in the same boat with us as far as using the computers until they no longer function. So it really doesn't seem like a viable option for us, because we don't have the inventory to even give to anyone, because if they're in use, they're in the buildings. If they're operational, they're in use. And also, again, if they did not have a computer at home, students most likely would not have the internet at home either. That would really limit their use. And there was also another question about providing access to computers for students, again, that may not have them at home. And each of the schools does provide time before or after school in labs or in classrooms. And also, on specific cases, teachers make themselves available for the students to use the computers in their classrooms. Also, there's a question about specific smartboard quantities at each school. And at the high school, we have 68. At Pierce, 37. Collycott, 20. Cunningham, 21. Glover, 30. And Tucker, 22. And to complete, the high school is complete. Glover and Tucker are also complete. And Cunningham needs 5. Collycott needs 3. And Pierce needs 22. Another question came up about the security of the iPads and or tablets. And again, we have a metal cart where they're all stored at Tucker, and that cart is also, and they're checked in and out daily, and that cart is also stored in a locked classroom, and the GPS is also enabled on the iPads too. And at Cunningham, where there are some more iPads and some Kindles, they are stored in a safe. And finally, I made a couple of changes on page 7 and 8 in the technology plan about the benchmark 2, the technology integration and literacy, about the percentages and expectations of using technology in the classroom.
So also in reviewing the document and taking in your edits, there were edits made on pages 7 and 8, as Bob referred to, and we also reviewed the document to ensure that it is aligned to the committee work that we're doing this year, with our presentation to the Capital Committee, our presentation in work with our 2 grant funders, the Milton Foundation for Education and the Copeland Foundation, as well as our work with the wireless. So we are aligning and have aligned those goals with this document that's in your hand. We changed the language to the level of proficiency of 100% to Kristen Bagley Jones's recommendation that due to this generosity of our donors, that we should have an expectation that all staff are utilizing technology, so that the plan reflects that. So in terms of the plan itself being submitted to the state, again, this templated report from the state is very much driven by the state, and we're just answering questions. There's not much room for us to expand other than to just provide some data and some goals as a district. So the technology plan has been reviewed and edited to reflect your comments and suggestions and questions. And in part to that, before we vote that, there were questions around compliance with Edline, use of technology, and in your green folder, I gave you, I wrote a memo to the superintendent regarding the three major questions, which are who is responsible for Edline compliance? The second question was how do we monitor the appropriate use of technology and the support? And what is the consistency of the use of technology in the classrooms? I provided a very technical answer by providing the evaluation tool for you to review and providing you also the appendix in the teacher's contract around Edline expectations. Informally, I sent out a survey to our staff to ask them about how much they use to communicate, how much are they using it in the classroom. We received, I'd say, a moderate return on that survey because we did it in about a 2-day span to get ready for the packet to go out. And I provided some of that data for you in the handout. I want to say out loud that the questions that were asked at this table were taken very seriously. We sat with the administrative leadership team, and we had the leadership team go on every teacher's account. And we did find, quite frankly, that we were probably at a B or B minus state in terms of Edline expectations that we have for our staff. Some obviously go well beyond the Edline expectations. There are some who are having technological difficulty that we have now enlisted Bob to support them and to work through some of those, as well as the tech mentors that we have in every school. And some of it was a result of having to make sure that if you expect it, that you have to inspect it. So we did a lot of inspecting last week, and in a way in which we created very good conversation in every school, and we do feel that due to the conversations at this table, good conversations had taken place and accountabilities were taken very seriously and very professionally. So I hope in the green folder your questions are answered. I appreciate Bob aligning the document so we can vote on it and submit it to the state with the approval of the school committee. And if anybody has any questions, I'd gladly answer them.
Ms. Kelly.
So looking at the number of smart boards, I'm wondering why Collycott would only have to be accounted for a total of 23. We're really there like a Glover in terms of number of classrooms, aren't they? Aren't they a 4 classroom per grade school? So why would the numbers be so different, I guess?
4 times 6 grades times 4 sections, hypothetically, is 24. And we only have 23 there, so I'm not sure. There is one co-talk class at that group. And I'm not sure whether that accounts for the preschool. I'm not sure if the preschool has
I'd have to look at the room each number.
But you understand my question?
Yeah,
So-
I do.
So does it mean that we have
Number
smart boards in the art rooms and the music rooms at Glover? And is that what our expectation is? And if it is, do we not have that same expectation for all schools? That would be my question.
The Milton Foundation, 2 years ago, at a fund in need, when I had to get up and ask for a fund in need, as happens once in a while, every art class in the district has a smart board as a result of that fund in need. So that's not an inconsistency that could be in place. I'm not sure whether it's around special education rooms or around different types of rooms that are, but we will investigate that.
Great.
Your comment is well received that it's about the same size school. They should have about the same amount of smart boards.
I would think so.
We'll review that.
And in addition to reviewing that and getting back to you about that number at Glover, we have the data, which I think might be valuable for the school committee, how many were bought by PTOs, how many were bought by MFE. I think it would be valuable when you hear this number, how few were bought with the Milton Public School dollar. And so when we give you that number, which yells out, Ms. Kelly at the Glover, we'll also give a breakdown of, which we have all of that right at our hand, who did the purchasing.
Ms. Bagley-Jones.
Mary, I think that would be really helpful. This is really helpful, by the way, John and Bob. I think that would be really helpful because also for our funders' point of view, how many did the MFE give? How many did, Cunningham and Copeland give? I think that's a great tracking thing, and I think it's a great acknowledgement of what the community has given us specifically. So thank you for doing that. So does this mean at Pierce, we still need 22 to have every, what are we defining by each classroom? Is it every
classroom,
math, English,
math, English, science,
English,
social studies, world language. It may not be a room that may be shared as a separate pull-out room.
Okay.
We have some of those. Again, there are 2 art rooms which already have them. It may eventually include the music rooms. One of the music rooms has one of the language rooms, the language lab has one inherent with the equipment. But we are definitely, the Pierce is the school that would need the most support.
And can I just follow up on that, John? Even just hearing you say that, it's a good education for all of us, the public, everybody. You can use these in social studies and in art and in music. Like, who would have known that? So it's helpful to really, the more you say about where we're using them and what classrooms, the helpful. So what you just said, John, you write that down and add it, then, the next year when we look at the accountability on this, I think that's really good for people to know what classrooms these are being used in and how varied the uses of them.
In the smartboard software that comes with each board, that's updated pretty well, far too regularly for me, but it's it comes with a litany of activities that are linked directly to the state curriculum frameworks in each subject, and they can just click right on it and it downloads the activity for every class, pretty much.
Can I ask a question? I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Could we, at some point, when we don't have much else on the agenda, it would be great to actually get a smart board here and show folks how you use it for what you just said, as well as in, a music class or an art class. It would be really fascinating, but only when we have very little on the agenda.
2016.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
It'll be one of those nights when we're on 3 a.m. live instead of on tape.
Right. Just an idea.
Ms. Sheridan.
I just have a quick question about the technology goals. They're awesome and very exciting. I just wonder, and I know that you have to follow a format, right, to present this to the state. They have certain expectations. But the goals range from 2013 to 2017. Are they ever prioritized or, attached to a timeline?
Well, every year, this is the long-term plan.
Right.
Each year, I have to file an update with the state on what we accomplished in the previous year and what we hope to accomplish in the next year. So that's a different report.
So that timeline that I'm asking about this would be in that document. So it would be these goals that we see here on this report,
Yes.
and they would be on a year-by-year basis, for example,
Yes, well, some of them are,
ongoing.
yes, some of them are ongoing that are not 1 year or another.
Can I ask a
But we
clarifying
just-
question?
yeah,
Would Member Sheridan like for us to, in the future, word the goals with more timeline and accountability language, as we do with some of the school improvement plans and so forth that we write, to allow the viewing public and the state to know what our goals are and what the timelines are?
I think that might be helpful, or prioritize, the things that we can do in a timely fashion, because many of these things that are on here have dollars attached to them. And we know that, we don't ever have a surplus of money to be able to pay for these things, but they're necessary to moving the district forward in terms of the work that we need to do. So personally, I guess I think that would be helpful. And also, I know that this document is used with the capital committee, right, to do the work that's needed to try and get funds for that. So I don't know if a dollar sign ever goes with those as well, or if that's again in that other document. A different document. Okay. All right, thank you.
Ms. Kelly?
In the addendum that you have in the green folder, which I appreciate, it looks like for Edline that really for syllabus, course description, grading policy, assignments, tests, and homework, that those pertain only to the high school and to Pierce Middle School? Is that, am I reading that correctly, I guess?
That's the exact language from the contract.
Okay. And under homework, which I think especially at the high school level, would be most helpful to be very specific, sort of even day to day. You're saying again, the exact language in the contract says monthly general description, outline of material? Okay.
Any other questions? Mr. Walker?
So, I think Ms. Sheridan is on to something with regard to the goals. I know this is time sensitive, so I'm going to vote to support this, but I have a couple of questions and a couple of requests. The first and most important one is, if I look at the technology goals that are articulated in this document, and then I look at the technology goals that we articulated for our capital request, the goals that we articulated in the capital request were strategic. They talked about the importance of technology to our educational objectives and how technology would support those objectives. These objectives that are shown in this document are quite tactical. I don't see any real strategic objectives. I don't see the link to our overall educational strategy and our overall educational priorities. So I understand that we have a standard format that we're complying with, but nevertheless, I think going forward, I'd like to see strategic goals that underscore what our educational objectives are and how technology supports that. So that's what I have to say about this report. With regard to the responses to the questions, I think Ms. Bagley-Jones raised this the last time we discussed it, but I would still like a better answer to how we can support children that don't have computers at home. There are national programs that donate laptops to children in third world countries, so I think we can probably figure out a better strategy than, well, you can come a little early for school or stay a little bit late at school. So I'm going to be looking for a more thoughtful response on that. With regard to Edline, I want a monthly report by teacher on Edline compliance. I'm growing frustrated with this conversation because I think we're just talking about what the contract language says and not responding to parents who say that they can't get the information that we say they should be able to get online to find out about what their children's assignments are. So I want monthly a report on Edline compliance by teacher. I don't need the names. You can give them unique numbers or alphabet letters, but I want to know by teacher who's complying and who isn't until we're at 100% compliance.
Ms. Kelly?
I appreciate your comments, but I think unless unless administratively we establish a standard, which it seems to me, based on the information we've been given, we have yet to establish, that the expectation for every teacher, let's just take the high school, is that all assignments are on Edline in a timely fashion.
Correct.
There may be a gap here, and I guess this is where I think we would like the administration to respond as to whether that is clearly the expectation right now, and if it isn't, what are the obstacles to getting that sort of standard in place?
Sure. So there are minimum expectation that can be expected is outlined in Appendix E in the Edline teacher expectations in the contract. That does not mean, so that's the minimum expectation that you can expect. So if that needs to be a level that is raised, then that would need to be raised with what we would do in any contract negotiations and talk about that. So that's the first thing. Secondly, teachers are evaluated through the evaluation tool generally about expectations for technology that involve the use of technology, communication, use of smartboards, et cetera, how they interact, several of the questions that I outlined and gave the survey on, as well as Edline expectations. But to say out loud that to expect more compliance than what is on that appendix contractually does not have to happen in the sense directly related to this document. That's a teacher.
I'm making a simple request, which I think is that my understanding is parents should be able to get the assignments that their children have off of Edline. They should be able to look at any given time and know what their children's assignments are. Is that or is that not the requirement?
The homework requirement, as laid out by Appendix C, says monthly general descriptions / outline of material, Milton High School and Pierce only. So that is not the contractual requirement. That's why I provided you this, which is contract language that's, I would say 2 contracts old, maybe 8 years old.
Yep.
So that is why I provided this for you as a baseline to review when we start to talk about that. I would say out loud that the majority of our staff go beyond that, but it is our job, especially at the directive of this group, which we explored last week regarding our 9th of January meeting, to explore that and ensure that we're getting the minimum from everybody in encouraging, providing professional development, and evaluating with higher expectations to that. But this is the minimum you can expect. That's how contracts work.
Well, this is disappointing and continues to be frustrating. But in any case, I want a report monthly on teacher compliance with that language.
Correct.
Ms. Kelly?
So if the administration was to say, you're creating a new standard expectation for the utilization of Edline, you're saying that, well, that's different than coming up against a conflict that might arise as a result of doing that. I would say, I would appreciate, if possible, and I'd like to hear reservations if you have any, to establishing that standard, and then let's put the expectation out there and see what the compliance is. Is that a reasonable request? Or
Then you go ahead, you started.
I don't understand the question.
So in other words, we've been talking for years about Edline, for years. And one of the expectations of a parent, and I think it's the way it's explained to them, is that you're going to be able to get information about your child's homework on Edline.
Right.
And yet, we, for lack of, it doesn't matter why we have not been able to achieve that. And so if tomorrow you were to put out, a new policy, administrative policy that says that these are the minimum requirements, and they may be above any written documentation that we have in place right now, what would the adverse result of that be? I guess that's my question.
Well, I think what we're hearing, which is the source of my disappointment, is that standard would exceed the requirements in the collective bargaining agreement.
But I guess that's what I'm saying, collective bargaining agreement aside. So people would come up and say, no, I'm not going to do it because it's not in the contract. And if that's the case, quite frankly, I would like to hear it. But we have been talking about this for years, that there are some minimum requirements. Can you please post the homework for your children so that parents can connect the dots and make sure that we're completing that circle, which we believe as an educational community is so important to connect the dots on?
Well, what apparently you and I thought was the minimum requirement is not the minimum requirement. And I don't think we want to publicly suggest that we should ask for a standard which is in violation of the collective bargaining agreement.
But I guess then I would, and Grant, you know what, we should take this conversation offline because we're going.
It could, may I follow up though, too?
Please.
What Mr. Phelan said when you inspected and you expected. And so, again, I'll give you the agenda, I'll give you feedback, I'll work with the leadership team, making it more of a priority when they're working with their staff, sharing examples of outstanding uses. You know, some of them, when the principals went through, there are many outstanding examples, partnering up people to see who to use it. And so I will tell you that we will make it one of our priorities and raise the standard and do some surveying and find out how parents like to use it, what do teachers think they need to use it. You know, we thought by giving them mentors, we were helping them if technology was too difficult for them. So we'll again, and do a better job at increasing the use of the Edline and maximizing it.
Ms. Bagley-Jones.
Can I just follow up on what Mr. Walker was saying, is that, and I appreciate the feedback on that, because it does say here, homework monthly general description of outline. I think at this point, it would be premature to ask for a monthly accounting of what the teachers are doing, but to instead say, this is up to the administration. That's their job. They've got to make this happen. We've spoken really loud and clear. Let me just finish. We've spoken really loud and clear about the concerns about this. And we have been talking about it for a long time, but now this is a step in the right direction and you need to just continue doing that. But I don't want right now a monthly accounting because it just says it's a monthly.
I do.
Okay. I was trying to make a friendly suggestion to
I got that.
a non-motion.
Sorry.
That's okay.
All right, I would accept a motion to approve the technology plan 2013-2017 for submission to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Walker, seconded by Ms. Bagley-Jones. Ms. Kelly?
Just a question on page 20, top of the page. It says ratio of type A/B students to computers is approximately 3.5 to 1. I didn't know what that meant.
The state specifies it's based on processor speed and memory.
It says ratio of type AB students. Am I?
That's okay. That's supposed to be AB computers.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I'll fix that.
A little different.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the technology report? Hearing none, we'll go to a vote. All those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you, Bob.
In the spirit of time, my email blast will have all the happenings notes, so we can move right along. Disappointed as you might be.
And I also noticed that the chief and Sergeant Richmond are here. They've been here for a while.
Yeah. We have two reasonably short pieces under my report, the card access system that we talked about, the quick update on the legal counsel situation, but we have our the cut list that we have to go through for the warrant committee for tomorrow night. So we have that's a fairly significant piece. And we do have the chief and the sergeant here. My worry about moving to executive session in the middle of this to accommodate them is we have to shut the cameras down, we have to go somewhere else, and it's a bit of a problem. I think we need to go with the agenda as we have it, with my apologies to the chief and the sergeant. I'm not sure we can break off at this moment and jump to executive session on that. Ms. Kelly?
Why is it that we couldn't do that? I'm sorry.
I'm just where we have to shut down the cameras, we have to clear the room, we have to...
Well, or we could move to another room, couldn't we? Or is that not under the
We could.
meeting law? Yeah. To me, I think this is enough of a priority, and it's an important resource that would be sitting through maybe some conversations that they don't need to. That I would appreciate if we could take it out of order, and would make a motion to do so.
All right, so you're moving to take the executive session for deployment of security to this point in the agenda. And was seconded by Mr. Walker. Any discussion on that? So we're moving to amend the orders. All
To
right.
return to.
And we will return after this item to open session. Motion to go into executive session requires a roll call vote. Oh, actually, this is a motion to amend the orders of the day, so we'll start with that. This is a motion to amend the agenda. It's been moved and seconded to amend the agenda to go into executive session currently for the purpose of deployment of security and to return to open session. So all those in favor of amending the agenda? That's unanimous. Now we'll have to take a roll call vote to go into executive session for the purpose of deployment of security to return to open session, hopefully in not terribly long time.
All right.
So I'll run around the table. Ms. Kelly?
Yes.
Ms. Bagley Jones? Myself, yes. Ms. Sheridan?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Ms.
Yes.
There, all right. We will excuse ourselves for a few minutes and we will return. All right, so we will resume the public portion of our meeting. And under my report, we had added the issue of a discussion of a card access system. So I'll entertain a motion to, with regard to card access systems for this building.
Two motions. The first motion is that we vote to support the allocation of any remaining school building funds to school security improvements, and that we ask the school building committee at its next scheduled meeting to allocate funds for that purpose.
Second.
Second by Ms. Bagley Jones. Yes, Ms.
Do we
Kelly?
have an idea of what that dollar amount might be?
Roughly about $65,000 is, I believe, what's left in the school building account. Any further discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all those in favor? That's unanimous. Your second motion?
My second motion is that we authorize the chair and the superintendent to enter into an agreement with a vendor that has been identified with technical assistance from Chief Wells and Sergeant Jack Richmond, and with work by Bill Ritchie of Consolidated Facilities and Matt Gillis, Assistant Superintendent for Business. They have identified a vendor that can install a card access system. This vendor has an outstanding reputation and, in fact, has installed card access systems at Milton Academy and at Milton Hospital. And I move that we vote to authorize the chair and the superintendent to enter into an agreement with that vendor with assistance from Assistant Superintendent Gillis, Director of Consolidated Facilities Bill Ritchie, and Sergeant Jack Richmond.
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Sheridan. And we'll make some effort to turn that into something that the minutes will reflect.
Yes.
That was,
Right.
might have been the world's longest motion. Ms. Kelly?
So that would be entering an agreement for a card access system for the entire Milton Public Schools, all schools, or is this just
Yes.
certain schools?
So the current thinking is that it would include 14 doors, 4 at the high school, 3 at the Pierce, 3 at the Cunningham, 2 at the Tucker, and 2 at the Glover.
Ms. Kelly?
And the funding source for that purchase, has that been identified, or?
That would be the school building funds.
Ah, there we go.
That's the 65,000.
Yes.
Or
So-
some
so
of it.
Some of it.
Well, that's, was my question. Do we have a ballpark idea of?
Yeah, surprisingly, the bid is approximately $65,000.
What a coincidence. Okay.
Any further questions on that? Hearing none, then we'll go to a vote. All those in favor? That is unanimous as well.
Thank you.
The other item under my report was the request for qualifications of legal counsel. We've had a screening committee read through the RFQs for legal counsel, identified 3 finalists, and we had a school committee meeting last week where we interviewed the 3 finalists. As of this time, we have not voted on any issue as to who we would select as our legal counsel. And so we would either have to put it on an agenda at some point to vote, or, so, yes, Sheridan.
I would like to make a motion that the Milton School Committee enter into an agreement with Mr. Joseph Emerson to represent our school committee as legal counsel.
Second.
Second by Ms. Bagley-Jones. Any discussion?
I'm ready to accept my fate here, but I'm going to vote no. Not so much because Joe hasn't done an adequate job, but I do think that based on the interviews that I saw, I think that we might have an opportunity to access a firm that has a much broader client base, that has a much more robust set of resources, and perhaps some more creative ideas about how we might approach our relationships with our unions going forward.
Ms. Kelly?
I concur with Mr. Walker and believe that it's time for a change. I've been sitting on this committee for a number of years, been through a number of negotiations with Mr. Emerson as counsel, and I think he's served us well. But I believe, given where we are in terms of, I think, maybe even just our roles as school committee, that we need a different type of advisor in terms of some of our negotiations going forward.
Any other comments? Seeing none, yeah, Ms. Bagley?
I apologize, I had to miss the interviews because my teaching schedule started earlier by a week than what I thought. So I really am not qualified to say I like this person over this person, but I've been very happy with Mr. Emerson, and I feel like he's very accessible, and so I'm just putting that out there. But I like Joe, and I'd like to keep Joe, but I also was not at the interviews, so I feel a little stuck. So I'd look to other people who were at the interviews to see what they thought, since I had to miss them.
Any other comments? All right.
Let's go.
All those, the motion is to enter an agreement with Joe Emerson.
And I believe that's a 2-year agreement? I think that's what did we say in the RFQ? I think we said,
I'd have to look at the RFQ, I believe.
I think it was 2.
I think it was 2. I entered an agreement under whatever the terms were of the RFQ.
The RFQ, right, good.
All right, so the motion is to enter agreement with Emerson Company. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstaining?
I have to, I think.
So it is 3-2-1, and the motion passes. Sorry?
3-2-1.
3-2-1. That ends my report. So we'll move on to Finance Subcommittee. We had deleted 2 of the items. The only item under Finance Subcommittee is the cut reduction list. Ms. Kelly, are going to yield to the
I
administration?
think I will yield directly to the administration for a presentation.
Well, first, we prepare our school budget for the viewing audience. Central office meets with Finance Subcommittee, Chair Mary Kelly, Leroy Walker, Becky Padera. Sometimes it's posted, often it's posted as a full school committee member meeting. Glenn Pavlicek will join. We put all materials out to the committee. So we developed this budget in the leadership team, as I said to the staff today, when we talk about the leadership team, the principals of all the buildings, central office, and our SPED director. And we work collaboratively. Our school committee members are in contact with the warrant committee, and we use the student data, again, where we have federal, we have state mandates. As I say to the public, the organization changes every year. We have 4,000 children, and 500 adults. And so this year, what was different, the Finance Subcommittee charged the leadership team with coming up with initiatives to move the system ahead, calling them advancement initiatives. And so we met with the principals and then all of Unit B, assistant principals, curriculum directors that you saw tonight. And it was a very positive reaction that the school committee had asked, what do you need to move the system ahead? What are your priority initiatives? Based on the data, where do you want to move the school system? And so we used this space, and we had 2 or 3 meetings. We brainstormed initiatives, and we worked collaboratively to identify our 3 priorities. We based these priorities on research, on student data, and we did a presentation for you on our 3 advancement priorities. So our 3 advancement priorities for the school district, emphasizing early literacy achievement, grades K through 3, closing the proficiency gaps, kindergarten through 12, and advancing science and STEM, STEM standing for science, technology, engineering, and math initiatives, K-12. And so working on those initiatives, coming up with goals and measures of how we would measure the success of attaining those goals, and costing out what we think we need in the system to make a difference in student achievement, emphasizing those advancement initiatives. We also have to consider our contractual obligations. We have technology costs. We talked about Edline tonight. We have contracts that we have to make our payments, pay our bills. We have special education mandated costs. I addressed the staff today, and the viewing audience and parents and the school committee understand that over the past years, we have had stimulus funds. And I referred to it as the perfect storm that wasn't really so perfect, in that our special education mandated costs, again, are high. And we have to, these are our bills. And we have done presentations, and we spoke to the warrant committee that as a result of the school building project and at the direction of the school committee and the administration, we have built programs within the Milton Public Schools so that children with special needs can attend their neighborhood schools. And they don't have to travel on special education buses outside of their own town, and they can go to school within their town. Creating programs within the district is cost-effective. More importantly than being cost-effective, it's the right thing to do for children with special needs. We have created these programs, and the demand for the programs is increasing by the population of children who have these special needs. Again, when we create the programs, we do them at a savings to the total school budget, when we don't have to, again, we first want every child to go to the Milton Public Schools. We have transportation expenses. We pay for as Mecula says, the big yellow school bus and the little yellow school bus. And one of our contracts is up this year, so we're looking, of course, a transportation contract for 2 or 3 years is going to increase, and we have facilities expenses. To maintain these buildings, you heard about the school building authority, the school building committee in Milton, overseen by the school building authority. And we take this seriously. We take this huge responsibility. I would say the schools were the supporters of the whole Consolidated Facilities Initiative. So that sets, we've presented to you at past school committee meetings, they're posted on the web, our advancement budget, and we also presented to you a very detailed Milton Public School budget. They're both on the web and at our website. So the charge, working collaboratively with the warrant committee, having the finance subcommittee, Leroy Walker, Mary Kelly, Glenn Pavlicek communicating with the warrant committee. We developed a FY14 school committee budget, Milton Public School budget, $38 million, $38,379,680. That budget was vetted by the school committee, using the advancement initiatives and again, moving the system ahead with our obligations. It was voted at the December 12th school committee meeting. So that budget was intact. The warrant committee directed the school system to say if we were only given a level dollar budget, in our kind of world, that means if we were given the same number of dollars that we were given this year, level dollar, that would have been $35 million. That's based on our FY13 number. The difference is $2,967,336. So we had that number difference. And so what we've been working on these past weeks and months and working with our finance subcommittee, the warrant committee charges us every year to say, they say to us, you have to tell us what will the Milton Public Schools look like if you do not receive that $38 million number. And so we work with the leadership team, and again, this is an anguishing, exhaustive process. We look at every level, every part of the organization, if we were only to receive the same number of dollars. And so we came up and worked through last week, and we came up with cuts and reductions at every level of the organization, and we worked with the finance subcommittee discussing and getting their feedback every step of the way. Over this past weekend, do you want to address that aspect of the process?
Sure. When we put together the $3 million worth of reductions from our budget, it was a fairly terrifying list of cuts, because taking $3 million out is not easy in a budget of this size. It really decimated the system almost literally. In my conversations with the chair of the warrant committee over the weekend, we said we didn't, this was a pretty draconian step, and from initial view of the revenue figures, it didn't look like it was actually something that was going to need to happen, that they seemed to have a certain amount of revenue to play with that would indicate that level dollar wasn't a real a necessary option, that they were going to have money to allocate. And I asked if the warrant committee would look at making an estimate of conservative estimate of what they would have to allocate to us, so we wouldn't have to go down through $3 million worth of cuts, especially because much of it would be to really stir up a lot of consternation, not only among the staff but also among parents as to what the system would look like next year, especially if there was really little chance that they would actually come to pass. So in the last couple of days, the warrant committee has made the request to us that instead of looking at level dollar, we look at level dollar plus approximately $1.5 million. And the number they had was $1,502,000 and change. So round numbers, $1.5 million. So the charge to the administration, and with precious little time to do it, given that this number only came to us in the last couple of days, is among the $300,000 worth of reductions that were initially put together, if we now only had to make roughly $3 million, $1.5 million of them, which ones would be remaining as cuts. And so this has been a work in progress up till 5:30 this evening as to what exactly this plan might be.
And so the number that we're looking at is $1,467,336. So we took, again, we had worked as a team, spoken with the school committee. We then took that number and we've worked over the years. Again, these are individuals that work in the district, that teach the children of the community not to prioritize. But what we did is we came up with a level 1 and a level 2. And so I'll begin with the level one. The level one, 13.7 FTEs. We looked at every level of the district: administrators, teachers, support staff, aides, custodians. And again, we've identified at that level $778,536. The impact of that 13.7 cuts would impact the district below level service funding. It would result in a reduction of current services and programs offered to students. Another level, the second level, we identified 7.1 FTEs at the amount of money, $493,800. Again, this would be a further reduction of direct services to students in the classroom and program elimination. When working with the warrant committee, I explained when I met with the staff today, Matt Gillis, John Phelan, and I, that we've worked over the years with the warrant committee, and there have been different approaches. We took this, we realized about the $1.5 million. Level two would be the first, our first priority if we were going to prioritize that 7.1 FTE, and then the next group would be the 13.7. We're going to detail those for you. The total reduction would be 20.8 FTE, keeping in mind that some of those are at every level of the organization, totaling $1,272,336. Excuse me?
Just could you say what FTE is? I don't think.
Full-time equivalent.
Thank you.
Full-time equivalent. And again, I bring you back to the beginning of the presentation when I talked about the advancement initiatives. We're going to ask the warrant committee that remember our advancement budget was $500,000. And so some of the positions are within the budget, but what we did was to identify $195,000 in that advancement that are curriculum materials, software, the professional development to implement that software, that's one-time purchases. So we isolated that $195,000 and hope tomorrow night when we go to the warrant committee to present to them. That would be the purchase of curriculum materials to support the advancement initiatives, and it would be a one-time cost. So the total, 20.8 FTEs, full-time equivalent, $1,467,336 total.
So just to be clear, if, let's leave the 195 aside, if by some miracle the warrant committee was to say to us, we have an additional $500,000 that we could put towards the schools, the administration's recommendation would be the level two would be the priority restore. If maybe we, just as a suggestion, maybe we can just, if we want to maintain those buckets, right? If we can put it, this would be the first restore, this would be the second. Just because level one and level two got confusing to me sometimes when I was reading this.
So,
but then,
Mrs. Kelly, so today, John Phelan just whispered to me, when I presented to the staff, I reversed them, so we will reverse them tomorrow.
Got it, okay. But then the other thing is within the level one or level two, are those prioritized, or is it just a list?
Great question. They're not prioritized.
I think that should be noted in this as well.
Good.
If we could.
And I thought that you were also going to ask, and we'll have to wait till after the warrant committee meeting, again, where, if there wasn't one-time funding, how we'd have to go back on the advancement initiative and work on that total 1.4 number, or again, look for alternative cuts so that we could put the advancement initiatives in the district.
But if you were to ballpark it and just say, okay, if we had to cut an additional number of teachers, it would be basically 4 teachers?
Yes.
Right.
So that I hope makes it clear for you. On the next page, so this level one reductions involves non-salary and faculty and staff. The first cut we detailed and if I might, before we start, very important that today we addressed the high school and middle school staff and the elementary school staff, because this is this is their school system, the town's school system, and we wanted them to understand what we were presenting to you tonight before we went public. We had a huge audience. Every year, they're involved in the budget, they understand it, many of them live in the community, and I analogize to them that if they don't live in this community, their communities are going through this kind of budget development. And so I think that you would have been very proud at the kind of turnout and the involvement and their attention to this very important process. The positions or the reductions. First, we talk about fees, and we're going to raise fees, and so we're going to be able to realize an increase of $200,000, increase various user fees and some beginning balance funds to charge back to the general fund expenditures to appropriate revolving funds. So tomorrow night, the warrant committee asked us for detail about revolving accounts, and there are strict rules on what revolving accounts can be used for, and we adhered to those rules, but we would look to, we have a proposal that was going to happen tonight, but will happen at the next school committee meeting, that will increase transportation, a proposal to the school committee, increase the preschool, summer school, PS orientation, adult ed, music programs, community schools, and the rentals. We're also going to look to increase the athletic user fees. These all have to be approved by the school committee, but that's not, the athletic user fee is not in this. So we would look for an increase of what we usually hit the revolving funds for, of $200,000.
But in that we say and utilize some of the beginning balances of revolving funds, some of this really is a one-time.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So understanding what that, what component of the 200,000 is, that is important.
We'll do that. Community schools chargeback, again, I analogize for the staff today that there are very strict rules in the food service revolving a fund. They have to have 3 to 4 months, Mr. Gillis, of payrolls. Everything that's hit against them has to, the lights and the heat for the food service. The community schools chargeback, again, to Ms. Kelly's point, this would be a one-time hit against this revolving account for $100,000. The next, additional assistance, FTE reduction, reorganization. This committee will remember, and the public who have children in our full-day kindergarten program, last year we took as a cost-saving measure our full-day kindergarten aides that were a 1 FTE, a 1 full-time equivalent, and we reduced them to 0.8. And they either come in early, or they come in late, or they leave early, working collaboratively with the teacher they're assigned to. Mr. Phelan and our special education director has spent a tremendous amount of time. This reduction would take 40% of our educational assistants and reduce them from 1.0 to 0.8, with the approximate 60% balance of the aides remaining at full-time. Mrs. Kelly had asked in our finance subcommittee, if a child's IEP says that they'll have a full-time aide, they will have a full-time aide. But there are other aides that might be able to be scheduled so that they can be 0.8, so that perhaps if a child has an aide and the instructional aide doesn't have to go to art, that aide during that time might be able to be moved into a different position. As Mr. Phelan said today, it's going to be a scheduling issue within the schools. Mrs. Kelly said this could impact a child who has had an aide all day to maybe have 2 aides. Again, I always preface this by saying none of these, this isn't a reduction that we would look to make. But again, when you're looking at this kind of number and you're looking at every level of the organization, that's one of the reductions we're suggesting. Elementary club advisors. We have clubs at the high school, clubs at the middle school that we'll address later. At the elementary level, through our contract, there are two dedicated stipends at each school to run these after-school clubs. At the high school and middle school, you've heard about the clubs, the outdoor club, all of the different opportunities. Again, are all around these advancement themes, around achievement. They've become MCAS support clubs, either before school or after school, students are targeted who are at risk of failing or being in needs improvement on their MCAS, those club stipends would be eliminated. The nurse. This has been a reduction that's over the years. It has been on some reduction lists, and then it's been off reduction lists, but there are 2 FTEs at the Collycott Cunningham. The 2 nurses share the nursing suite at the Cunningham Collycott. We're proposing a 0.4 reduction of the 2 nurses that would decrease services to the Cunningham Collycott and the preschool student population. But again, similar to the aides, we would come up with a flexible schedule so that the nursing station obviously would always be covered. Whether each of them are reduced by 0.2, we have spoken to the principals about this proposed cut or reduction. The next reduction would be the librarian, and this was part of the advancement budget. For 2,000 students, 4 elementary schools, we have 1 elementary librarian, and then we have an aide. So at the Glover Tucker, the 1,000 students have library every other week. And the aide is at the Collycott Cunningham, and that allows the students to go in and return their books on the off week. All of the research that we shared, and I would encourage the public to look and read that research, speaks to the value of a library in our schools, an active library that children and staff can access on every day. When I was an elementary principal, I said your library has to be the heart of your building. If you're going to succeed and your children are going to thrive and become lifelong learners and readers, the library has to be the heart of the building. It's hugely connected to early literacy and to closing the achievement gap. Again, I'll bring you back to Ms. Henry. Our goal is to have every single Milton Public School child have a Milton Public library card. It was startling when we found out every child didn't have a library card. That is a reduction of $58,000, 1 FTE. The last on this page, the PE health teacher at the Pierce School, an FTE of 0.7 for $40,000. This would eliminate the health education program in 1 or 2 grades at the Pierce Middle School and increase class size in other elective offerings. Going to the next page, continuation of these level 1 reductions. Mr. Phelan?
Sure. These level 1 reductions at the high school would first and foremost be a teacher in the world language department, specifically Spanish. This would be a 0.8 FTE teacher. That's someone who may work 4 days a week for a reduction of $46,400. This would increase class size, and the department was eliminating one of the AP Spanish course offerings that they were traditionally offering each year. They formerly offered 2 AP classes in Spanish, and that will be reduced to 1 AP section. A teacher of business, which is a part-time position at 0.4, that is a $23,200 reduction. This would decrease the technology and business elective offerings and increase the class size and other elective offerings. A custodian, we are looking to reduce 2 custodians. That reduction would be $80,000. The reduction in the cleaning capacity and the current average square footage for the non-senior custodians is about 31,000 square feet per custodian. The reduction would have a new average of now 34,600 square feet per custodian. That's a sizable difference in area that they would need to clean and be responsible for. We also have building subs. We have 2 at every level, 2 building subs at the middle, 2 at the high, and 2 at the elementary. These serve a vital function for providing substitute support. They're all certified teachers. When teachers go on maternity leave or have long-term illnesses, we are always able to replace our teachers with certified staff. We would only be able to have 1 building sub per level with a $27,000 reduction. The residency coordinator, which is a new position to the district, we feel provides a great service to the town and the school district in terms of ensuring that all students live in town are able to go to school, and no students who do not live in town can attend school. We are reducing that position by 0.2. There's an administrative line item that we would like to reduce $25,000. in a line item that will restrict the offerings of professional development and curriculum development and assessment analysis that administrators do on a yearly basis. Though that first level, that level 1 group of reductions will total 13.7 full-time equivalent teachers and/or faculty or staff, and the total of those 13.7 faculty and staff is $778,536. That is the first level of reductions that would take place.
And I would just bring your attention, and we'll reverse the numbers tomorrow. In the columns, we've designated for the position what level, high school, middle, elementary, or district-wide. The second column, FTE, to Ms. Sheridan's point, full-time equivalent, the amount of money for the position, and then we've created impact statements for each of those positions.
Ms. Keller?
Just on the building subs, is the FTE on that correct? Which would imply that building subs presently make $9,000 a year, is that?
No, we tried to be very realistic. If a building sub gets paid at a rate higher than a daily sub, so a building sub would be $128 per day, and a daily sub would be $80. We would still have teachers absent and still need to cover those days out, but we would cover them with an $80 a day sub, which is a daily sub. So the district would net $27,000 because we'd still have to provide substitutes. So
Then I think the FTE is misleading. I don't know whether the 3 FTE should even be there. If we're saying we're placing a person with a person and it's a,
Well,
the difference is
we're reducing 3 positions of building sub, but we would ultimately have to provide that service with daily subs off a daily list at a lower rate.
right.
So
So
the
so
net-
really it's a financial well, obviously it's an educational difference from your
It's
perspective.
a very big
It's
educational
huge.
difference, and it's
But from an
actually-
FTE perspective, it's 1-to-1.
I'm holding most of my comments to the end, just so you don't think I don't have any comments. But there, I would say substitution of building subs with daily subs, to Ms.
Okay.
Kelly's point.
Ms. Sheridan?
Do you want comments as we go along, or do you want to wait till the end? We'll do whatever you want.
Doesn't matter to me, whatever the pleasure of the group is.
Let's keep going.
We want to look at this level 2
All
cuts.
right,
and then
now we'll
take
go
our
to the
comments.
level 2 cuts. The level 2 cuts. The first reduction, and then this is all faculty and staff. All of these reductions are made up of faculty and support staff in the Milton Public Schools. The first reduction and elimination would be of band, strings, and chorus at the elementary level. So we took all of the FTEs, and at the elementary level, starting in 3rd and 4th grade, again, the feeder program for your hugely successful middle and high school program, we're going to eliminate all band, all strings, all chorus program at grade 5. The band and strings are at 4 and 5. That would be 1 FTE, taking those points at $58,000. The next reduction cut is a .6 teacher who teaches the future problem-solving program at grades 4 and 5 in the elementary schools at a cost of $34,000. Again, the future problem-solving, we've brought the teams, all of the 4th graders are taught in this really, you talk about your 21st century skills, the future problem-solving program teaches our children how to think and write and work collaboratively using every one of the 21st century skills. It's an opportunity for children, just like children who excel in band and strings and chorus at the 5th grade to have the experience during the school day to work on this team, and we have had groups go to the state and national level to compete. Unbelievable opportunity for our students, but again, when you're looking at these kind of cuts and reductions, we had to look at every level of the organization. The next cut reduction is a .5, an ACE classroom teacher. This is for children who have demonstrated an unusual talent in art. In the 4th and 5th grade during the school day, they've given art enrichment. ACE stands for Artistic Creative Enrichment Program. And it would also, coupled in that, matched in that .5 reduction of $29,000, you remember how we worked collaboratively with the parents who are advocating for the arts, and we increased grade 4 and 5 art from 30 to 45 minutes. That would bring the art back to 30 minutes. The next reduction is at the middle school. This would be a reduction on the number of sections offered while increasing class size from 29 to 30, and it would reduce world language sections and options at the middle school. It would be a .2 of different teachers as described by Dr. Spalding, until the reduction at that level would have to be a 1.1 in the world language, and it would also be driven by student choices, and that would be at a cost savings of $58,000. The next reduction, a teacher in social studies at the middle school, a 1 FTE at $58,000. This, again, one of the jewels of the Milton Public Schools, Pierce Middle School, is the team approach. And Mr. Phelan can really speak as an expert to this. Do you want to detail what this cut will mean, John?
Sure. We say each year that we never want to get this far, and in this level of reduction, we would get to the point where teachers would have to share, would have to teach out of their grade and out of their team, which will begin to pull apart at the middle school level the most vital piece of wrapping your hands around all of the children and all of their needs, academic, social, emotional, et cetera. It would restrict the ability for parents to be able to interact with teachers on a regular basis, which they currently do, because they wouldn't have time to meet with parents because their periods off would not be the same. It would restrict collaboration of teachers who work on teams together, who work on the children's social emotional growth. They would restrict their ability to meet on academic and assessment work that they're doing in curriculum work, and this would be a very difficult cut for the middle school to sustain that has been working very, very well together for quite a while.
And the feedback I get from parents, again, the team approach at the middle school is hugely successful. Mr. Gillis, do you want to continue with those cuts?
Sure. Next, we would have an art teacher at the middle school. This would be a half-time position. It would reduce the number of sections offered while increasing class size. Same thing with music. It would be a half-time teacher. This negatively impacts the advanced offerings at the middle school and then impacts the high school program in future years. Grades 6 through 12, the extracurricular clubs at both the middle school and the high school, and the new middle school athletic program. We'd be reducing this line item, which is initially $107,000. We'd reduce it by $82,000, which would leave $25,000 for the high school clubs, National Honor Society, Student Council, the successful debate team mock trial, and the senior and junior class advisors are all we'd have funding for if this were implemented. We'd also have to cut a history teacher at the high school. That would increase class size, eliminate sections, eliminate the freshman seminar, and a contemporary issues course. We'd also cut the teacher and child studies preschool program here at the high school, which does bring in some tuition, and that is actually reflected there in the price, the amount reduced. It would increase class size and other core academic courses, and electives could move to 30 to 35 students, which makes some of our classrooms kind of tight when we start getting that high. So that's a total of 7.1 FTEs, or $493,800. And if we were to get more money in a chunk of approximately $500,000, these would be the first things that the administrative leadership team would restore. Are there any questions on this page?
Their recommendations. If we could go to the next, and then we'll go back for questions. Again, I'm going to bring you back to the page that we began with, talking about what were the budget drivers of this FY14 budget. And again, the advancement initiatives, emphasizing early literacy achievement, K through 3, closing the proficiency gap, K through 12, advancing science and STEM initiative, science, technology, engineering, and math initiative in the Milton Public School at all levels, K through 12. Again, the contractual obligations we have in technology costs, special education mandated costs, transportation, and facilities. Next, we've detailed for you, again, this total of $195,000. Our total advancement budget was $500,000, and you've seen pieces, one piece in the, one of the reductions. The other pieces are we're recommending to fund, but we want to ask the warrant committee with one-time funding, again, in the advancement, the early literacy, to have $50,000 for our K-1-2 curriculum, so that in the Milton Public Schools, if you've followed the implementation of curriculum, it's always one grade at a time. $50,000 would enable us at all 4 elementary schools to put in reading curriculum and a formative reading assessment program. Our new language arts coordinators, you know, they're meeting with John Phelan all the time, and this is their priority. This assessment is essential to know and to be able to, again, assess where our children are, what their needs are, and to move them ahead. At the same time, there's a $10,000 teacher training for this new curriculum on the formative reading assessment. That would be a one-time professional development to train our teachers on these materials. In the advancement, closing the proficiency gap initiative. This is a district-wide, again, Jonathan Redden, the Cunningham principal, we have had a presentation from this assessment software that we would look to after-school, extended day, Saturdays in the summer, and work it into our classrooms, work with this assessment software, maximizing the instructional time we have with our students, assessing what their strengths are, what their needs are, and that's a $30,000 piece of software. District-wide, closing the proficiency gap, $5,000, a one-time request for extended day materials to work with these children. I've explained at this table that I feel that, and we heard in this presentation tonight, and I heard school committee member Walker ask that many of these children, if they're given extra time to fill in their back skills, they can excel. And again, it's a matter of, I analogize when I was a teacher, if we both play the violin and you're not savant, who's going to play better? Who's going to play better?
The one who
The one who practices. And so these extended day programs and being able to fill in the back skills and give our students some pre-teaching experiences is a huge initiative for the district. Again, district-wide, closing the proficiency gap, training on that ANET piece of software. That would be one-time training for the staff who was going to use it. And in the very important science area and STEM, $76,000 worth of science curriculum. This is divided between the elementary school moving the STEM initiative forward to the second grade, hugely successful initiative at the first grade in our English program, and the balance, $56,000. We have a huge need for science curriculum at the middle school. And again, we have to put, you heard about the new standards in math, you heard Life Lagares talk about the material being produced to match these standards. We have to have the material to teach our students so that they can meet these standards and achieve. And we have an issue in the area of science, and we need these curriculum materials. And also in the area of science, $14,000 training PD on science curriculum materials. Again, working with Dr. Spalding and Marilyn Decker on these science initiatives and with the elementary principals. The total non-salary reduction one-time cost would be $195,000. Bringing you back now to the summary of our budget. Again, level 1, we detailed 13.7 positions totaling $778,000. Level 2, we grouped and the FTEs to 7.1, $493,000. If the increments, again, working with the warrant committee, our first request would be these level 2, 7.1 positions at $493,000 to be restored. The total reductions added up to 20.8 FTEs, $1,272,336. And again, Equally important to us, these advancement initiatives, we're going to ask the warrant committee if there was one-time funding for $195,000. If you add those two numbers, $1,467,336 at an FTE if we were not level service funded. And again, with our advancement initiatives, we would have to reduce 20.8 FTE positions.
Comments? Mr. Walker.
So, let me try to sum up what appears to be our strategy here. We've gotten $1.5 million from the warrant committee already, because we started with a level dollar amount that was $2.9 million in cuts, and thanks to the chair and thanks to the chair of the warrant committee, we're now working with an amount that's 1.5 million higher. So our strategy is to say, but in addition to that, if you can give us another 200,000, then we would be able to fund those materials, curricula, and assessment tools that we said are essential to the success of our advancement initiatives. And if you could give us another $500,000, then there are some staff that everyone agrees that we should restore. I think that's incredibly risky. And more importantly, I just, with all of the energy that you and we have put into developing and advocating the advancement initiatives, I don't see how we could include $200,000 in curricula and materials that threaten our success in those areas. And I don't see how we can include a librarian that the superintendent was incredibly articulate about, underscoring the importance of libraries in general and librarians in general, but more importantly, in this particular case, ensuring, again, the success of the early literacy initiative. So and while this is an agonizing exercise, and as the superintendent has outlined, you can't talk about $1.4 million in cuts without looking at staff, because staff is the majority of our budget. But I'm troubled by what appears to be, with the exception of the custodians, if you look at the non-instructional areas and the administrative staff areas, they seem to be coming away virtually untouched. And at the same time, we're talking about affecting teachers that, again, as the impact statements underscore, they're in areas where there's incredible importance: art, music, and so on and so on. So I think we have more work to do, and I'm troubled by this strategy, because unless the warrant committee revenue projections are much more generous than I think they are, I think we could be in a situation where we're going to have to make these cuts, and if we do, then we've put at risk the very things that we said were most important.
Could I make a comment?
Go right ahead.
The hope was that when the administration found out that there may be funds in a stabilization account, and I may get that name wrong, at the warrant committee, that is only available to purchase things in a one-time fashion, that I believe we had a dialogue in a sub-finance committee meeting that if there was anything that happened to be one-time in nature, that we could apply or request to the warrant committee to ease the burden of the other reductions, that we try to do that. So that I believe that is an attempt to take anything out of this budget of the $38 million that we have put forward and voted, that if there was anything that we could do to alleviate the traditional budget process by making any request for one-time funds, that we put it up there. Unfortunately, they happen to be in the advancement list of things that we would like to purchase. If they were not available to one-time purchase via the warrant committee, we would have to reevaluate and maybe have to reduce, to Member Kelly's point earlier, up to 4 teachers to replace that funding, so we could go forward and purchase those materials. But I believe that was a dialogue that we had at Subfinance, and we were hoping to take advantage of what we see to be a pool of funds that is uniquely defined, that we are uniquely trying to take advantage of.
Well, I don't think it's productive for me to talk anymore about what I think the warrant committee will do or won't do or has or doesn't have, so I'm going to stop that discussion. But if we have to look elsewhere, and I think we do, I'm not suggesting for a minute that that be teachers, because I think teachers have already suffered quite a hit here. I'm suggesting quite emphatically that I think that the non-instructional staff and administrative staff areas are areas where we need to take a much harder look at where we can find efficiencies and possible reductions.
For the advancement initiatives.
For the advancement initiatives and those other positions that, other positions and cuts where we acknowledge in the impact statement that it has an impact on the advancement initiatives that we say are the most important objectives that we have. So we've got a line where we're taking an administrative cut to curriculum, assessments, and materials, but that's exactly what we need for the advancement initiatives and the librarian and so on.
Other comments? Let me just say the purpose of this is we have a meeting with the warrant committee tomorrow night. We're looking for, the effects of this level of cut or of this level of funding, depending how you look at it. I think we need something to present to them to give them an idea of the magnitude of the impact we're talking about at this level of funding. I think, it's obvious that this list is only a few hours old in its current form and may need to be altered somewhat, but I think it, in many ways, at least suggests the impact of a cut of funding at this level to the system. And I don't think we have to leave here tonight with a definitive and final list of cuts. I don't think we can, unless we tend to stay a very long night. But I think we have to have an idea of the magnitude that we're talking about here. I think this is one instance of the magnitude. I think to the extent that we may have to modify it going forward between now and, say, the Saturday Warrant Committee meeting, or even beyond. I mean, beyond the meeting doesn't help. It doesn't make our case to the Warrant Committee, but, I mean, we have to have some idea to, should more funds be available, to make a case that we need them.
And can I just,
Yep.
just finish up here, and then I'm done, I think? It depends on what the outcome is that we're looking for here. If I'm guided by the agenda, it says a vote, and I think if we take a vote, then that means that we're saying that this is the list of cuts that we're prepared to discuss with the warrant committee. I'm not prepared to do that. If we're looking for a sense of the room and a discussion document, and we can say to the warrant committee, as you said, this list is about 24 hours old. We discussed it last night. We didn't vote, but here's our first discussion document. I'm okay with that, but I'm not prepared to say these are the cuts I would vote to make if we have to make those reductions.
And if I could, so your suggestion would be to, other than teachers, make additional cuts and reductions to fund that $195,000, rather than seeing if there possibly is one-time funding?
No. I'm saying that if and when we're ready to talk to the warrant committee about exactly what the cuts are we should make, and maybe that's right before the Saturday meeting that we reach that conclusion, but if we're going to make that case, then I don't think this is the right list. Some of the things are on there that have to be on there, and I certainly agree with that, but I think this is, if we don't get any more money, so the worst-case scenario is that we don't get any more money, this is not the list of cuts I would vote for, because it does too much damage to the advancement initiatives that we've said are critically important.
And I said to the staff today that my experience has been working with the school committee, the warrant committee, and next week we go out to each PTO. The lists have changed every year that I've participated in the process. And so, you know, it's the school committee's vote whether you want to develop 2 levels, whether you just want to give, you know, I heard you about the advancement budget, but whether we even want to separate the 2 different groups, or do we just want to put those cuts down and then have committee members react to the different positions?
Ms. Padera.
So I think so we're going to be talking to them about potentially what would happen. We have no idea what kind of cuts, because we don't necessarily know our final number of money. And so, you know, all these, you know, everybody could speak to certain things that reach out to them. Maybe it's clubs, because, you know, they know kids that really need those clubs. They don't participate in anything else. And, you know, they're not on the National Honor Society or one of the other clubs that are still eliminated. For other kids, you know, we've talked about Future Problem Solving, which is a great club in terms of the new initiative to build citizenship into and relevancy for kids and what's going on in the world. Or maybe they're very artistic and ACE. So I think it's important to talk about, and for parents to see these are potential cuts that could happen, and the warrant committee to see that these are potential cuts, regardless if we make additional cuts that are maybe less painful to children in the school. These are cuts that could happen unless we're better funded, correct?
Other comments? Ms. Kelly?
Just, I think we have to come to some consensus as a committee as to how we are presenting to the warrant committee tomorrow. Is this the list, or is this a work in progress? And if it's a work in progress, then I guess I would request 2 things. One is that we identify at least $195,000 worth of additional cuts with which, to the warrant committee, we could present that there is an opportunity with one-time events, but absent that being available, these priorities are so important, here are the additional cuts. Additionally, I would agree with Mr. Walker that the librarian advancement piece, we need to find a substitute for that as well. The substitute may be, we do have a library aide, which is maybe half of that or something, but I'm not sure. But to me, I would agree. If our biggest priorities are our advancement initiatives, which we've been talking about, then we should try and rework this. And then the one other thing that jumps out at me is the nurse at Cunningham and Collycott and the preschool. And if there's a way, and granted, it may mean that it's a 0.4 nurse cut, but if it means that the high school and the middle school need to do some rotations or something to do coverage, I would much prefer, because essentially at the Cunningham Collycott, we have what are our most vulnerable kids. And in some instances, especially at the preschool, they have medical needs that they need to be able to be serviced. And I would, this, you know, cuts at something that I think we should definitely stay away from.
Ms. Sheridan?
Just to that point about the nurse, I remember, I believe it was 3 years ago, prior to 3 years ago, we had annually received a grant that funded nursing at the high school, and they said we weren't eligible because we had received it for so many years in a row. Is that grant, could it possibly be available to us again? Or is that something that's gone away?
We can research that.
I know Margaret Gibbons had spoken to that.
Ms. Padera?
So there's just 2 things, technical things. The teacher of the child studies preschool, so that would eliminate the preschool at the high school completely. Is there any way we could look at if we increase tuition in a way to keep it, or what we could, you know, or lessen that? Because I know the tuition there is relatively low compared to what a preschool would charge. And the other thing is, I don't know if it would help, but the residency coordinator, that would not eliminate that position, but just cut it. And what, maybe in the impact statement, how much money we've saved this year from what that residency coordinator's done?
Bagley Jones.
Just a couple of things, and the hour's late, so I may not be coherent. It would be helpful to have a prioritized order. I appreciate the work that's gone into this, but it just feels like I'd like to know from the administration what the prioritized order of these cuts, or the other way around, is. I'd also like to look at anything that's a cut that's the whole program. Like, for example, ACE is grade 5. That's all of ACE, so it's cut. The teaming at Pierce would be cut. Child studies, the preschool, but also there's a child studies teacher who teaches a class. That would be gone. And clubs would still be there, but only a very few clubs. So anything that's like, if we make the cut that's up here means that the whole thing is gone, then I think that has to be looked at pretty seriously. And then I look at the proficiency gap different than what I look at the advancement budget. And I look at that advancement budget up there, and I see about 4 teacher salaries out of that. Am I correct? In that 195 one-time funding money? So instead of cutting 7.1 teachers on level 2, we'd cut 3, basically, if we didn't have that 200,000 in the advancement
You're gonna
initiative,
cut 11.
correct? Or am I wrong?
You'd be cutting 11, going the other way.
Oh, sorry, I told you it's very late, it's 11:30 at night. So, yes, I'm sorry. So, to me, there's the proficiency gap, and then there's the advancement budget language, which is this is the first year we've talked about an advancement budget. And to me, the foundations of our budget, of our educational system, are the things in here that we're cutting. So how do we add in advancement initiatives when we're cutting out whole programs and all these other things? It doesn't make sense to me.
So we label that component of our budget advancement, but I would argue in many cases, it's raising the it's getting to proficiency. The literacy, science, the same thing. We are not proficient in those places, and we need to do something different to get there. And I think that's what's being brought forward. I would agree with you that to cut some of the other basics
right.
at that expense, but I would also say to you, we've had this same proficiency gap, and we haven't really made significant gains. And so at what point do you do something different?
And I guess my concern is, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
My concern is that in ways that we can't even anticipate, we would widen the proficiency gap if we went ahead with these kinds of cuts. I just don't see how we would advance anything if we had to make these kinds of cuts, which at this point we do, right? We have to cut 21 FTEs, according to this. And I don't see how we would advance with that cut.
None of this is easy.
No.
I guess it's, any budget is a matter of prioritization.
So direction for tomorrow night, if we worked, again, we had started with the 2.9. If we work and present to the warrant committee the option of the one-time funding, but these would be the cuts and reductions if, for the advancement, these would be additional reductions in funding. And we look at the different suggestions that the committee brought forward, and we eliminate the levels, and we present all of the positions tomorrow night to the warrant committee. How does the committee feel about that?
How are you going to, I'm sorry, how would you get that done? It's 11:30 at night, Mary?
No, work tomorrow.
Yeah, I know. Okay.
With the leadership team, identifying positions. We heard the directive where those positions should come from, and eliminating the levels, but presenting to the warrant committee. I'm not looking for a vote, but I'm looking for, is this what I'm hearing for the group to present tomorrow night to the warrant committee? And again, it hasn't been voted on. We can explain that we went from 2.9 to these cuts, but if there wasn't one-time funding, actually add to the presentation. We heard the directive where those cuts should come from the different levels.
Sure.
I personally wouldn't expect you to go to that level of changes in this document between now and tomorrow. I think, as Mr. Walker had said, to say that this is our first conversation, that we've only had it for a short time. I think having those two levels and the categories is a little bit helpful because it kind of frames the cuts and also the advancement initiative. So I wouldn't eliminate all those and just make one big list of cuts or reductions, but rather use what you've got here and go with Mr. Walker's suggestion.
Well, Mr. Walker's suggestion was to look somewhere else for 195,000.
Right, but not between tonight and tomorrow.
Well, I think it's a bad idea to show them a slide that says we're going to cut $195,000 in advancement initiatives.
Okay.
After we sat there with them for 2 hours, and I think convinced them pretty well, and I think they're all smart people, so they understood why those priorities were priorities, but I think they understood what we're trying to accomplish here. So to come back a few weeks later and say, but you know what, if we have to cut, we're going to cut some of that. It's counterintuitive, and I think it undermines our credibility somewhat. So I'd say look for somewhere else, and we don't have to be specific, but I think we could say, and I talked with Mary and John about this afternoon, we could say administrative and non-instructional staff reductions, period.
I think the intent of the 195 was to say, we know there's, for instance, $2.2 million in free cash and so forth. If we could use some of that to do this, that would lessen our burden to 1.2, and here we would be. But I think you're right, we'd have to say in the event that there isn't free cash for it, it wouldn't be this that would be cut, it would have to be something else. This would only be a way to lessen the cut a little further. This wouldn't be the thing that was cut.
And I promise not to do this, but as you and I discussed, I'm just not sure how many times we can go to the free cash well.
Ms. Kelly?
Right, so I would agree with that perspective, that if we could identify, but I would also include the librarian
Yes.
advancement position.
Yes.
As well as what did you say, the professional development maybe?
Yeah,
Is that what it was?
25,000 in professional development. materials,
And if we can
assessments, like-
bucket that and say that that's administrative, non-instructional reductions that we will find, that might be the approach. Still presented as an opportunity, but I would prefer not to go in with the assumption that says, oh, we know you have free cash and you can give us $195,000 of it with which to do the advancement, non-teaching.
And by the
component.
way, we still need another 500,000 because we don't want to do level 2 either.
We can do
Right.
that tomorrow.
Yeah.
We can take care of that.
No, that was us talking to the line committee.
Yes.
And again, our intention was, the advancement was a new approach, just looking for the one-time funding. But we can say that it would come from administrative and support, and add the librarian to it. And what was the other addition you said?
There's a $25,000 in an administrative cut for professional development, materials, and assessment. Page. Yeah, it is.
That's not advancement, well, that could be related to advancement, but that's not within the advancement budget. Are we talking right above the 13.7 and right above the
Yes.
7.7? That's an administrative reduction that we wouldn't be able to expound on too much publicly, but that's not, that could be related indirectly to the advancement budget, but that was not a category or a line in the advancement budget.
It's not part of the 500, though.
That's not part of the 500.
I think I'm following you, but if it impacts the thing, and we heard earlier today about all the work that's being done on the math curriculum, if it impacts, we have so many things that are going on that require professional development, it would seem counterintuitive that we would do anything that would reduce that.
Well, that was
So-
one
so
of
ma-
those cuts at the administrative level that you were looking at.
So perhaps a rewording of the
I get it.
description might,
Maybe the impact statement.
right,
needs to be-
rewording of that might be
Right.
helpful.
So if I might repeat,
Go ahead.
look to administrative and support level reductions to cover the $195,000 that we were looking for funding for a one-time purchase, plus the librarian. And I didn't really hear the group about the level ones or the level twos.
I don't think there's a need to coalesce them at this point. I mean, leave them be as they are. I mean, there is a certain distinction in priority between the level ones and level twos. Let's leave it there. When you put a list together of 30 things that are completely unranked, it says less than, at least, you know, if you put them in two buckets, it's slightly smaller, people see them a little better. So I would leave them as level ones and level twos for the purpose of tomorrow night anyway.
Yeah. And I have to tell you, this came from the principals individually. They did a tremendous amount of work. They hear one another, but that's their direct input from their levels.
And just to, you know, to reiterate, I mean, tomorrow night's the first night the warrant committee has a chance to ask us questions in detail about our budget. Now, granted, we are getting close to the February 9th date, but I've never known this discussion to be settled in one night. They are going to come with questions tomorrow night that we're going to have to reply to, so there will be plenty of opportunity in the next short term, but still plenty of opportunity to refine positions back and forth. So I don't think we have to think we're going in tomorrow with the absolute be-all and end-all. I think, you know, it'll be their first pass at our budget and their first questions, and there will be follow-ups, and this is our first pass at the effects, and we will follow up, and I think it's a conversation that's going to go on till at least that Saturday meeting and possibly even beyond.
And perhaps if I might, last year, I know that the actual items, the actual people, the materials on the reduction list changed after you heard from the PTOs. So this might be advantageous to be able to listen to the PTOs. I want to add one more thing that we talked about with the staff. When you talked about administrative and support staff, over the last 3 years, we've gone to professional development, we've gone to all of the other areas, and we can't go back to professional development for any more cuts, reductions. We worked with Mr. Gillis, and we have used every cost savings we can in electricity and utilities. And so I explained to the teachers today that this is different from last year or 2 years ago, when you have staff that's 85% of your budget. You can't save in professional development that kind of money. And again, to consolidated facilities, and under Mr. Gillis and the facilities subcommittee, we've done the energy savings that we can do. So for the viewing public, we do look at every single aspect of the budget.
Anything further on this topic for tonight? All right, thank you. Facilities report, Mrs. Sharp?
I'll give that at the next meeting. Thank
Old
you.
business, we have citizen speak topic response.
This isn't a topic response, but I'm assuming that if we heard from Andrea Sinnott, and she seemed to have some interesting points, so if we're going to make some changes to the first grade assignment policy, we should do that fairly quickly, I think. You missed that, citizen speak.
Oh, okay.
I'll fill you in.
Thank you.
Next meeting agenda items, budget, budget, and budget.
Could I ask that we get an update on class size, as well as just in years past, we've gotten just a listing of the Milton High School and Pierce Middle School class sizes?
And if I might respond?
Yep.
I want you to take special note in your green folder to this tracking, so all of the answers, so we're not very taking good. an extra half hour.
It's the official Leroy Walker tracking system.
I think it's the very
Your name has your name's on there a lot too.
Yeah. So, again, we don't take an extra
for
half
doing
hour of the meeting, But, you know, when you ask questions, we meet the next day, we always have, but now we've put them into the tracking system so that none of them slip by. So if the four of us who all take notes, you ever find out that one of your requests slipped by, let us know after you go over this, if there's a question you've asked that we haven't picked up.
And
But we don't take in.
Kudos to Charlene Roach, who also helped to construct that tracking system.
Absolutely, and to you for the idea. But I'd ask you that, so none of your questions are going unanswered, but it would take another half hour or hour of the meeting if we detailed them.
Not necessary.
All right, we have no one here for citizen speak. Can't imagine why not. We will pass on the other two executive session items and take them at another time. So at this point, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, and good night.